What if the biggest lie we've ever been told about business is the myth of the genius in garage?
Oh, wow. Right out of the gate. But yeah, I mean, we all know that picture.
Right, the exact picture I'm talking about. Hollywood has basically hardwired this into our collective consciousness. It's always like brilliant college kids sitting in a dorm room.
Usually drinking absurd amounts of caffeine.
Exactly, completely heedless of any conventional boundaries.
Mhm.
And then they're suddenly struck by this lightning bolt of pure inspiration.
Yep, the magical eureka moment.
And they just code through the night, launch a flawless product by dawn, and inevitably, they conquer the world.
It's a great story. I mean, that narrative serves a very specific cultural function for us. It essentially operates as the modern-day equivalent of the hero's journey.
Oh, I like that. Replacing the sword and the dragon with like a laptop and a VC firm.
Exactly. But the problem is that it isolates success as a product of inherent, almost genetic brilliance. Like you either have it or you don't, rather than treating it as a replicable methodology.
Which means that story is actually a dangerous myth. It's the product of massive survivorship bias and, well, after the fact, rationalization.
For sure. Because we only ever hear about the ones who make it to the magazine covers.
We never hear about the thousands of devastating failures that started with the exact same level of youthful enthusiasm. The same work ethic and, honestly, often brilliant underlying technology.
And that's exactly why we're here today.
Yes, today we are doing a deep dive into the introduction of Eric Ries's foundational text, The Lean Startup. Our mission today is to fundamentally reframe how innovation actually works for you.
Because it's not magic.
No, it's not. Over the course of this conversation, we are going to explore how you can transform the chaotic, highly uncertain process of building a new business, or even just a new product, into a manageable, rigorous scientific discipline.
And this matters deeply for you, the listener, regardless of your current role.
Exactly. Whether you are a solo founder launching an app from your living room or, a corporate manager trying to create a new internal program at a Fortune 500 company.
Because if you rely on the old rules of traditional business planning, you are going to doom your new ideas.
You need a completely new engine for continuous innovation.
And the necessity of that new engine becomes painfully obvious when we actually examine what happens when you rely on the old one.
Oh, yeah. The source material opens with this deeply personal, frankly, kind of brutal examination of failure.
It really does. It's set against the backdrop of the early 2000s, right as the dot-com bubble bursts.
Right. So the author and his co-founder had built this company called Catalyst Recruiting. And they had a genuinely compelling vision.
They did. They were building online profiles for college kids to share with potential employers.
Which, if you look back at that timing, was entirely prescient. I mean, they were predicting the precise market space that LinkedIn and honestly, even Facebook, would eventually dominate.
Yeah, their reading of the macroeconomic trend and the future of digital networking was spot on. Absolutely correct.
But they still failed. They spent all their money, they built all the underlying technology, they had the passion. But the whole venture just collapsed entirely.
It's heartbreaking to read, honestly.
The author describes this brutal final scene where he and his co-founder are just standing in the pouring rain, arguing in the middle of the street.
And they are so creatively and financially depleted at that point that they can't even agree on which direction to walk.
They just part in anger. And he basically admits they were doomed from day one.
Right. And the autopsy of that specific failure is where the theoretical foundation of this entire philosophy actually begins.
So what's fascinating here is when we look at Catalyst Recruiting, we have to isolate the variables, right?
Exactly. Because we know the market demand eventually existed. We know the technology functioned perfectly well.
And we know the founders had the right work ethic. So the failure wasn't a lack of vision.
No, it was a systemic failure of process. They operated under this huge assumption that if they just built a robust, flawless product based on their initial vision, the market would naturally reward them.
They treated their foundational assumptions about user behavior as established facts, rather than, hypotheses that required rigorous testing.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because I think we really love those visionary stories. It almost feels wrong to say that passion and vision don't matter.
Well, it's a very comfortable psychological safety net.
Yeah, totally.
Mm.
Because if we believe that success is just about having the elusive right stuff, it gives us a ready-made excuse when we fail.
Oh, absolutely. We can just tell ourselves that the timing was wrong or the market just wasn't ready for our genius.
Right. It completely absolves us of having to examine the mundane, kind of boring structural choices that actually dictate whether an enterprise succeeds.
Ascribing success to magic is just so much easier than ascribing it to management.
It reminds me of the fundamental difference between like a passionate home cook and a master baker.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, you can have a chef who is deeply emotional about their ingredients, who possesses an incredible palate and a grand vision for this towering, beautiful pastry. But baking is an unforgiving science.
It really is. If that chef refuses to measure their ingredients like flour down to the gram, or if they refuse to understand the chemistry of how yeast interacts with specific oven temperatures, that cake is going to collapse.
Yep, it's going to fall flat every time.
Passion is the heat, but the structural process is the recipe. And you cannot bake a cake with just heat.
That is so true. The heat accelerates the molecular reaction, but it does not organize the molecules.
So for the listener, the practical takeaway here is actually deeply liberating. Startup success is not a consequence of magical timing or good genes.
It means the process can be engineered, it can be codified, it can be learned, and it can be taught.
But the shift from treating entrepreneurship as an art form to treating it as a scientific discipline requires abandoning something very difficult.
Traditional perfectionism.
Exactly. Which brings us to the author's next venture, IMVU, which was founded in 2004.
Now, this company represents a radical departure from the Catalyst recruiting methodology.
Radically different. So IMVU was building 3D avatars for virtual worlds. They were integrating user-generated content and micropayments.
Which, by 2004 standards, was highly complex, intensive software development.
Yeah, that wasn't trivial stuff back then. But instead of hiding in a laboratory for 2 years to perfect this massive technological marvel, they took an entirely counterintuitive approach.
They built a minimum viable product, or MVP. And by their own admission, it was an absolute disaster of a release.
It was terrible. It was riddled with bugs. It literally crashed users' computers.
Yeah, they shipped it well before any traditional software engineer would deem it even close to ready.
And they charged money for it.
Yeah.
And then they altered the code base constantly, shipping new versions dozens of times a day.
Which is just wild because that behavior violates every core tenet of traditional business education.
Oh, completely. In a standard corporate environment, you are taught to fiercely protect your brand equity, right?
Right. You never release a product that is subpar. You conduct extensive market research, focus groups, quality assurance testing.
All leading up to this heavily marketed, pristine launch event. But IMVU inverted that entire model.
They specifically sought out visionary early adopters, people who were willing to overlook glaring technical flaws because they desperately wanted the solution the software promised.
See, I've always struggled with the IMVU story when I look at it through a traditional PR lens.
Oh, so?
Well, wait, you release a terrible product that crashes computers. How is that not just textbook brand suicide?
That's a really common reaction.
Because it breaks the fundamental social contract between creator and consumer, which is, I give you money and you give me a tool that functions. Why wouldn't those early users just abandon the platform immediately and warn everyone else away?
Because under conditions of extreme uncertainty, that social contract hasn't actually been established yet.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a startup in its nascent phase literally does not have a brand to ruin. The whole concept of brand suicide implies that there is a massive loyal customer base that will feel betrayed.
And IMVU didn't have that.
Exactly. IMVU recognized that their initial user base was incredibly small and highly forgiving, provided the company was actively learning from them.
So they weren't selling a finished commodity. They were inviting these early adopters to basically co-create the platform with them.
Precisely. But even in that co-creation process, their methodology was honestly kind of abrasive.
Oh, right. The source material points this out. While they talked to these early customers constantly, they emphatically did not do what the customers asked them to do.
Which sounds so counterintuitive. If a user demanded a specific feature, the engineering team wouldn't just build it.
Why not? I mean, shouldn't you listen to your users?
You should listen, but they understood that customer requests are often terrible predictors of actual customer behavior.
Right. People are notoriously bad at articulating what they actually want or need.
Exactly. If IMVU had simply acted as a short-order cook, fulfilling every feature request, they would have built a bloated, incoherent product.
So instead, they viewed customer input as just one source of raw data.
They were running continuous experiments on them. If a user complained about a feature, the team might build a tiny, low-fidelity version of an alternative.
Just to see if it actually changed the user's engagement metrics. They measured what users did, not what they said. To clarify the mechanism of a minimum viable product, let's step away from software for a moment.
That's it.
Because there's this flawed analogy people often use. They say an MVP is like opening a restaurant and serving half-cooked pasta, just to see if people want Italian food in the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one. And it's terrible.
Right. Serving bad food doesn't test the market.
Yeah.
It just proves you are an incompetent chef.
Exactly.
A true MVP is more like printing a beautiful menu for a proposed Italian restaurant, putting it in the window of an empty storefront, and tracking how many people stop, read it, and try to open the locked door to get a table.
That is a perfect analogy.
You haven't bought a single ingredient. You haven't signed a lease on commercial ovens. But you are gathering hard, empirical data on foot traffic and culinary interest in that specific neighborhood.
That distinction is so vital. The printed menu tests the foundational assumption, which is, do people in this area desire this specific type of cuisine enough to attempt a purchase?
And if no one tries to open the door, well, you have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital and months of labor.
You have achieved validated learning without actually building the full product.
So IMVU's buggy software functioned precisely like that printed menu.
Right. The goal of their early release was not to achieve a flawless technical rollout. It was to test their riskiest assumptions about whether people would actually pay for digital avatar accessories.
This concept of validated learning is really the beating heart of the lean startup methodology.
It absolutely is.
But what really fascinates me is the historical lineage of this idea. Because this highly iterative, messy process of shipping broken software and running rapid-fire experiments, it didn't originate in Silicon Valley.
No, it didn't. It actually comes from a completely different world.
It was adapted from the most rigorous, physically constrained industry on the planet, the Japanese automotive sector.
Yeah, the entire philosophical framework is derived from lean manufacturing.
Which was pioneered by Taiichi Ono and Shigeo Shingo at Toyota, right in the decades following World War II.
And to understand why this maps so well to software and startups, we have to look at the massive economic constraints Toyota faced back then.
Right, because American auto manufacturers like Ford, they relied on mass production, enormous batch sizes, massive stockpiles of inventory, and these rigid top-down assembly lines.
Ford could afford to build 10,000 identical black cars because they had the capital and a massive homogeneous domestic market.
But post-war Japan had neither of those things.
They had severe capital constraints, very limited warehousing space, and a fragmented domestic market.
They needed different types of vehicles, from small trucks for farmers to compact cars for urban centers. They literally could not afford the American mass production model.
So Ono and Shingo had to invent a system that was fiercely intolerant of waste.
They drew on worker creativity, right?
Yeah.
They developed concepts like shrinking batch sizes to adapt quickly to changing demand.
And just-in-time production, where parts arrive at the assembly line exactly when needed, which completely eliminated the need for those massive inventory warehouses.
And they also radically empowered the individual worker. Like in a Ford plant, stopping the assembly line was practically a fireable offense. The line must always move.
But at Toyota, every single worker had access to the andon cord.
The andon cord. It's such a brilliant concept.
It was a physical rope they could pull to stop the entire production line if they spotted a defect.
The psychology of the andon cord is just incredible to me. You are giving a frontline assembly worker the authority to halt millions of dollars of factory output.
Because the underlying logic is that fixing a defect immediately at the source is exponentially cheaper than letting a flawed engine travel all the way down the line and then trying to fix a fully assembled car at the end.
But mapping the manufacturing of a physical Toyota Corolla to, like, writing abstract code for a 3D avatar, that requires a massive translational leap.
It does, and the translation really hinges on how we define the word progress.
Right, because in a traditional manufacturing environment, progress is easily quantifiable.
It is the production of high-quality physical goods. A value-creating activity is any action that physically shapes the metal into a vehicle the customer is willing to buy.
Therefore, anything else, excess inventory, waiting time, overproduction, is defined strictly as waste.
But here's the catch for startups. In the environment of a startup, you don't even know who the customer is yet.
Exactly. You don't know what they value. So how do you define waste when the very definition of value is a complete unknown?
That is the genius of Ries's adaptation here. In knowledge work, especially under extreme uncertainty, you cannot measure progress by physical output.
You can't measure it by how many lines of code a developer wrote or how many features were shipped in a quarter.
Because if a team works at maximum efficiency to build a product that no one wants, their efficiency is completely irrelevant.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit terrifying for managers. If you are efficiently building widgets nobody wants to buy, your efficiency is actually 100% waste.
They have optimized a process that shouldn't even exist.
It's like being the absolute fastest sprinter on the track. You might have biomechanically perfect form, your breathing is optimized, you're running at record-breaking speed.
But if you are running in the opposite direction of the finish line, your speed is actively detrimental.
Yes, it is just getting you further away from your goal faster.
So in the lean startup framework, value is redefined entirely. Value is not the delivery of a feature. Value is the acquisition of a proven benefit to the customer.
And because the startup does not yet know what that benefit is, the fundamental unit of progress is validated learning.
Every daily activity, every meeting, every line of code that does not directly contribute to validated learning about your customer or your business model is categorized as waste.
Think about the implications of that for a moment. If a team spends 3 weeks perfecting this heavily animated PowerPoint presentation to pitch a new product feature to an internal committee.
Oh, I've seen that happen so many times.
Right. And that feature hasn't been tested with a single actual user yet. Those entire 3 weeks are pure waste.
The presentation just creates the illusion of progress. People are busy, slides are being formatted, meetings are happening, but no validated learning has actually occurred.
It requires a ruthless, almost uncomfortable level of intellectual honesty to look at your daily calendar and realize that 80% of your activities might be classified as waste.
But stripping away that illusion of progress is what actually allows the lean methodology to function.
And to operationalize this, the source material synthesizes all these concepts into a specific, actionable framework. The 5 core principles of the lean startup.
Let's walk through those because they really distill the whole theory down.
Yeah, the framework begins by basically redefining core terminology. Principle 1 is entrepreneurs are everywhere.
We tend to restrict the word entrepreneur to a very specific demographic. Usually, tech founders in a garage in Palo Alto.
Right, but the lean definition is much broader. A startup is simply a human institution designed to create new products and services under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
The operative phrase there is extreme uncertainty. The legal structure of the entity is totally irrelevant.
The size of the company is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Whether it operates in a basement or on the top floor of a Fortune 500 company just does not matter.
Which means an HR director who is tasked with creating a completely novel employee onboarding program from scratch.
With no historical data on how a remote-first workforce will respond to it.
They are operating under extreme uncertainty. They are an entrepreneur.
Or a government official designing a new public health initiative in the middle of an unprecedented crisis. They are running a startup.
Exactly. Which leads naturally to principle 2. Entrepreneurship is management.
Because these incredibly diverse institutions are all operating in the dark, they require a specific operational system.
We historically view management as the domain of the predictable, optimizing supply chains, forecasting quarterly earnings based on historical trends.
But extreme uncertainty breaks traditional management. You cannot forecast the sales of a product that has never existed to a customer base you haven't even identified yet.
So the management system shifts entirely, and that brings us to principle 3, validated learning.
Startups exist to learn how to build a sustainable business, and that learning has to be validated through frequent scientific experiments.
Which is operationalized by principle 4, the build, measure, learn feedback loop.
This is really the core engine of the lean startup. It's the scientific method applied to business.
You form a hypothesis, you turn that idea into a minimum viable product. That's the build phase.
You release it to see how customers respond, gathering empirical data. That's the measure phase.
And then you analyze that data to make a strategic decision about whether to pivot your strategy or persevere on the current path, the learn phase.
And the objective of entrepreneurial management is not simply to complete this loop once. It's to minimize the total time it takes to iterate through it.
Right. A team shouldn't spend 6 months in the build phase before they ever reach the measure phase. The goal is to figure out how to run that entire cycle in 6 weeks, or even 6 days.
But this introduces a massive operational hazard, doesn't it? If you are rapidly cycling through the build, measure, learn loop, deploying MVP after MVP, How do you know you aren't just flailing wildly?
That is the danger.
Like, we praised IMVU for shipping code dozens of times a day, but chaotic motion isn't the same as forward momentum.
No, it isn't.
How does a team objectively measure the results in MVP when traditional financial metrics like ROI or total market share are essentially zero in the early days?
And this is where we get to Principle 5, which is arguably the most rigorous and crucial concept in the book, innovation accounting.
Ah, innovation accounting. Holding innovators accountable with a new kind of math.
Exactly. Traditional accounting uses lagging indicators. A profit and loss statement tells you what happened last quarter, but in a startup, those metrics are useless.
Yeah, you can have zero revenue and still be making massive progress, or you can have a sudden spike in revenue that is completely unsustainable.
So innovation accounting replaces traditional forecasts with actionable, accessible, and auditable learning milestones. It forces you to focus on the boring stuff.
We really need to dissect the difference between a vanity metric and an actionable metric here, because this is where most teams completely deceive themselves.
Vanity metrics are the silent killers of startups.
Let's say I launch a new app and I proudly announce to my investors that we have reached 100,000 cumulative downloads.
Sounds great on a slide deck.
It sounds like massive success. The graph always goes up and to the right because cumulative totals literally can never decrease.
But that is the ultimate vanity metric. It feels good, but it offers zero predictive power, and it tells you absolutely nothing about the health of the business engine.
Right. It doesn't tell you how much it costs to acquire those users.
And more importantly, it doesn't tell you if any of those 100,000 people actually open the app a second time.
You could be acquiring users at a massive financial loss, only to have them churn immediately because the product is fundamentally broken.
So how does innovation accounting solve that? How do we measure the actual behavior of the users in a way that proves validated learning is happening?
Through rigorous techniques like cohort analysis and split A/B testing.
Instead of looking at total cumulative users, innovation accounting forces you to look at specific groups of users over time.
Okay, give us an example of how that cohort analysis works in practice.
Sure. Let's look at the cohort of people who downloaded the app in the first week of January. What percentage of that specific group is still actively using the app in week 3?
Let's say it's 5%.
Right, so that 5% is your baseline. Then you run an iteration through the build, measure, learn loop. You change the onboarding flow, maybe make it simpler.
Okay.
Now you look at the next cohort, the users who downloaded in the second week of January who experienced the new onboarding flow. Are 8% of them still active in their third week?
Ah, so if the number moves from 5% to 8%, you have mathematically proven that your change to the onboarding flow created real value.
Exactly. You have validated learning. You aren't guessing. You aren't relying on a PR spike in total downloads. You are tracking the specific behavioral changes caused by your product iterations.
And without that rigorous baseline and cohort analysis, a startup risks falling into what the methodology calls the land of the living dead.
Which is a terrifying state for a company.
It really is. The product isn't a massive breakout success, but it's not failing dramatically enough to force the founders to shut it down.
They have just enough vanity metrics, just enough intermittent positive feedback to keep grinding away.
Draining resources, capital, and literally years of their lives without ever achieving a sustainable business model.
Innovation accounting forces a reckoning. It holds innovators accountable by demanding proof that the engine is actually working.
The clarity of this framework makes so much sense in retrospect. You just apply the build, measure, learn loop to whatever uncertain project you're managing right now.
But the source material acknowledges a grim reality here.
Which is that even with these principles laid out clearly, incredibly smart, well-funded, highly educated people still drive their projects off a cliff at an alarming rate.
Constantly. And they usually fail because they fall victim to one of two fatal extremes.
Right, because human beings tend to retreat into comfort zones when faced with extreme uncertainty.
The first trap, and perhaps the most common trap, especially for those coming from corporate backgrounds or MBA programs, is the allure of the perfect plan.
Ah, yes. Traditional management relies on solid strategy and market research.
Because when faced with the terrifying unknown of a new venture, the human brain desperately seeks the illusion of control. We retreat to what we know.
We start to believe that if a project fails, it must be due to either a failure of initial planning or a failure of subsequent execution.
So the natural reaction is to just plan harder.
It's the analysis paralysis mindset. A team will spend 6 months drafting an 80-page strategic roadmap.
They will commission expensive market research reports, build incredibly complex financial models predicting revenue out to year 5.
And they try to account for every possible variable before writing a single line of code.
The fatal flaw in that approach is that traditional planning and forecasting rely entirely on a long, stable operating history and a relatively static macroeconomic environment.
Yeah, a company like Procter & Gamble can forecast next year's toothpaste sales with incredible accuracy because they have decades of data.
And human dental hygiene habits do not shift rapidly.
But a startup possesses zero operating history. It is operating in an environment of total fluidity.
So the perfect plan is literally a hallucination. It is an elaborate document detailing a world that does not exist, representing a catastrophic waste of time and capital.
Now, when teams eventually realize that the massive 80-page business plan is utterly useless the moment it makes contact with reality, the pendulum often swings violently in the exact opposite direction.
And that's the second trap.
Right. They abandon all methodology and fall into the just-do-it school of chaos.
The cowboy coder mentality.
Logic basically goes, well, if traditional management and planning stifle innovation, then management itself must be the enemy.
Chaos must be the native environment of the entrepreneur. Let's throw out the rulebook entirely. Just start building things and see what the market does.
But we have to parse a very fine distinction here. Because earlier, we praised IMVU for releasing buggy software, testing things wildly, and changing their product dozens of times a day.
Yes, we did.
To an outside observer, that looks exactly like the just-do-it chaos. How is that not the exact same trap? How do we differentiate between a startup that is flailing wildly and a startup that is executing the lean methodology?
The distinction lies entirely in the underlying architecture of the action.
What do you mean by that?
Well, IMVU's approach was measured chaos. It appeared chaotic on the surface, but underneath it was governed by a relentless, rigid scientific process.
Ah, so they were utilizing innovation accounting?
Exactly. They were not just changing code on a whim. Every single iteration they shipped was a specific hypothesis tied to a specific metric.
They didn't just throw spaghetti at the wall to see if it stuck.
No, they hypothesized that a specific type of pasta, boiled for a specific duration, would adhere to a specific surface material, and then they measured the exact duration of the adhesion.
While the just-do-it school simply throws the whole pot at the wall and hopes for the best.
Exactly. Startups are incredibly dynamic and disruptive, which leads people to think that process will stifle their magic.
But passion, energy, and raw speed are resources. And they are finite, precious resources that are entirely too valuable to waste on unmeasured, chaotic flailing.
You cannot let the chaos manage you. You must build a system to harness and manage the chaos.
That is the core operational mandate here. The listener really needs to introspect and identify their own default trap.
Yes. Ask yourself, when you are handed a project with unknown variables, do you instinctively open a spreadsheet to model the outcomes, basically delaying the actual work?
Because if your default is analysis paralysis, your immediate takeaway is to stop modeling, define your riskiest assumption, and launch a minimum viable product immediately.
And conversely, if your default instinct is to just start throwing paint at the canvas, changing designs every week based on whatever article you just read, acting purely on gut impulse,
then your takeaway is that you need to implement constraints. You need to enforce innovation accounting on yourself.
you have to write down your hypothesis and your success metrics before you run the test. Otherwise, you will always just rationalize the results after the fact.
You must strike the exact balance between the velocity of execution and the discipline of measurement. That is where sustainable innovation actually occurs.
It really is.
Bringing all of these threads together, we arrive at one unifying insight that serves as the foundation for everything that follows in this methodology.
Entrepreneurship is not a mystical art form.
It is not a genetic trait, nor is it a magical endowment reserved for a chosen few who happen to look good in a hoodie on the cover of a tech magazine.
It is fundamentally and profoundly a form of management.
By shifting our definition of progress entirely away from executing a grand plan and toward the rigorous pursuit of validated learning, you take control of the process.
You can engineer your own success. You can stop relying on luck.
And more importantly, you can stop wasting your most precious, unrecoverable resources, your time, your passion, and your human potential on building beautiful products that absolutely nobody wants.
The tools exist to demystify the unknown. It is simply a matter of having the courage to apply the scientific method to your own grand vision and accepting the data, even when it contradicts your initial assumptions.
Now that you know you need to treat your brilliant ideas like scientific experiments, a massive new problem arises.
Oh, there's always a new problem.
Always. How do you actually define what your startup is testing? You might think you know exactly what you're selling, and you might think you know exactly who your target customer is.
But as we'll see in the next deep dive, your most foundational, deeply held assumptions about your own idea are probably completely wrong.
And that is exactly where the real learning begins.
Picture the classic movie montage of a startup being born.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We all know that one.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm talking about. There's this brilliant, maybe slightly misunderstood college kid in a messy dorm room.
Right.
Or maybe it's a rogue rebel, like tinkering away in a dimly lit garage in California somewhere.
Surrounded by empty pizza boxes.
Yes. Empty pizza boxes, fueled entirely by caffeine, completely ignoring all the boundaries and rules.
Right, the classic genius at work.
And they're staring at a screen or maybe a circuit board, and then boom, a flash of pure, unadulterated inspiration.
The magic moment.
Exactly. They strike a match of creative genius, type a few furious lines of code, and the world is just, forever changed.
We absolutely love that narrative as a society.
We really do. But what if the biggest lie we've ever been told about building a successful business is that it requires that kind of pure, chaotic, creative genius?
I mean, it's a deeply ingrained mythology, to be honest.
It is.
We're practically conditioned from birth to believe in this, genetic lottery of the visionary founder. We want to believe in the magic spark.
Right, but the problem with the magic spark is that relying on it is exactly why the vast majority of new ideas fail.
Completely fail. Yeah.
Because when you actually look at the data, when you look at the real stories of how massive world-changing things actually get built, it rarely looks like that movie montage.
No, it surely doesn't.
The real secret to navigating the unknown and building something people actually want isn't chaos, it's not rebellion.
Right.
It's actually a very specific and, frankly, highly misunderstood word.
Which is?
Management.
Oh, man. I mean, that is a word that usually makes any creative, ambitious person just completely shudder.
Right.
It sounds so boring.
It sounds like the absolute antithesis of innovation. But that is exactly what we are dismantling today in this deep dive.
Yes, we are.
We're exploring the core concepts of entrepreneurial management, pulling directly from Chapter 2 of the Lean Startup Methodology to define exactly how you manage the unknown. And this is a mission I am genuinely excited about.
Yeah, me too.
Because whether you, listening to this right now, are launching a side hustle from your basement, or maybe you're prepping for a massive corporate board meeting.
Or even just trying to navigate a highly uncertain project at your day job.
Exactly. You are about to learn why treating your new venture as a grand, highly structured experiment is actually the ultimate shortcut to success.
Right. We're going to define what a startup actually is.
And I think we really need to emphasize right up front that, the principles we're diving into today, they aren't confined to software developers.
No, absolutely not.
They aren't just for tech founders in Silicon Valley.
No, these are foundational, universal principles for anyone in literally any industry who is trying to build something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Right. So let's just start with the elephant in the room.
Let's do it.
We're putting the word entrepreneurship right next to the word management.
Which is tough for a lot of people.
It is. For anyone who fancies themselves an innovator, those two words are like oil and water.
Oh, 100%.
I know, when I think of starting a company, the absolute last thing I want is, more management.
Right, because people associate management with soul-crushing bureaucracy.
Exactly. We picture endless spreadsheets, TPS reports.
Middle managers in gray suits just saying no to every creative idea.
Yeah, just a general stifling of any real momentum.
And that visceral reaction, it's incredibly common. And it's entirely understandable based on how most of us have experienced management in our careers.
Right, because we've all been there.
Because of that very rational fear of bureaucracy, aspiring founders and project leaders tend to run entirely in the opposite direction.
They just sprint away from it.
Exactly. They adopt this chaotic, unstructured, just do it attitude.
Yeah, the move fast and break things vibe.
Right. They actively avoid processes, they shun discipline, and they reject accountability metrics because they firmly believe that implementing any kind of management system will kill the magic of their idea.
They think process is the enemy of progress.
Precisely.
But the reality is that this just do it approach leads to catastrophic failure way more often than it leads to success.
Yeah, moving fast and breaking things sounds great on a bumper sticker.
Right. It looks great on a t-shirt.
But when you're actually burning through your life savings or your company's innovation budget, Breaking things usually just leaves you with, well, a lot of broken things.
And no customers.
Exactly, and no customers. So we really have to ask the critical question here.
Which is?
Why does traditional management work so beautifully for established companies, but completely crash and burn when you try to apply it to a startup?
Okay, yeah. Why is that? Because traditional management clearly works in some places.
It does. To understand that, you have to look at the mechanical history of what management actually is.
Okay.
The tremendous success of general management over the last 100 years, going all the way back to figures like Frederick Winslow Taylor and the dawn of scientific management.
Right, the industrial era stuff.
Exactly. That system has provided us with unprecedented material abundance because general management was designed to optimize established systems.
Okay, so it works when things are already set up.
It's absolutely brilliant when you have a long, stable operating history to draw from.
Yeah.
If you have that history, you can make incredibly accurate forecasts.
Let me try to paint a picture of that, just to make sure I'm following.
Yeah, go for it.
Imagine you're running a massive automaker.
Okay.
You've been building essentially the same type of combustion engine cars for, say, 50 years.
Right.
Because you have half a century of historical data, you know exactly how many steering wheels you need to order for the third quarter.
Exactly. You know the numbers.
You know exactly what your supply chain looks like, how long it takes a shipment of steel to arrive from overseas, and like exactly who your target demographic is.
Yes.
You know that a 45-year-old suburban parent is your prime buyer for this specific minivan.
Right. And because you have all of those known variables, planning and forecasting are excellent, highly effective tools.
You can just map it all out.
You can build a complex Excel spreadsheet, plug in your historical data, and predict your revenue for the next 12 months with incredible precision.
Because the environment is stable.
Exactly. You can optimize the entire system for maximum efficiency.
But a startup has absolutely none of that.
None. Zero.
You don't have 50 years of data. You don't even have 5 days of data.
Right.
In a true startup environment, you don't even know who your customer is yet.
You really don't.
You might have a hypothesis, a guess, but you don't actually know. You might not even know what your product should ultimately look like to solve their problem.
You're operating in an environment completely devoid of certainty.
Right.
And that is the defining characteristic we need to focus on. Extreme uncertainty.
Extreme uncertainty.
So what happens when you try to use the traditional tools of general management in that environment?
It sounds like a disaster.
It is. What happens when you demand a detailed 5-year business plan, or long-term revenue forecasts, or rigid milestones from a team that is doing something that has literally never been done before?
You're just demanding hallucinations at that point.
Exactly. Hallucination.
You're essentially forcing them to plan in the dark.
Yep.
It's a complete waste of time because the team is forced to spend like weeks building a beautiful, perfectly formatted 70-page document full of absolute guesses.
Just to satisfy the traditional management structure.
Right, just to make the boss happy.
And it creates a really dangerous illusion of control. The spreadsheet looks professional, right? The graphs point up and to the right.
So leadership feels super comfortable.
Exactly. But the foundation of those numbers is entirely fictional.
Wow.
When traditional management is applied to a startup, it doesn't just fail, it actively harms the venture.
Because it's pointing them in the wrong direction.
Because it forces the team to optimize a plan that is statistically guaranteed to be wrong.
Okay, I hear that. But I have to play devil's advocate for the listener here for a second.
Bring it on.
Aren't entrepreneurs supposed to be the rule breakers?
Sure, that's the stereotype.
If I'm trying to disrupt a legacy industry, why would I want and implement a new kind of discipline? Does an adding process just turn my exciting startup into another boring corporation?
I get that.
I mean, the whole appeal of the startup world is the freedom to just follow your gut and build cool things, right?
And that is exactly the trap that catches so many brilliant people.
It is.
Yeah. Because the goal here isn't to take the boring, rigid rules of an established corporation and force them onto a delicate new venture.
Okay, good.
The point the source material is making is that entrepreneurship requires a radically different kind of management discipline.
A different kind. Okay.
Right. It requires a system specifically designed to harness creative energy rather than let it just, dissipate into chaos.
Right, because pure chaos doesn't actually build anything sustainable.
Exactly. And frankly, there is nothing romantic or exciting about spending 3 years of your life building a product that absolutely nobody wants to buy.
Oh man, that is a harsh truth.
It's brutal, but it happens all the time.
The passion, the late nights, the raw energy that people pour into these new ventures, those are resources that are simply too precious to waste on executing a flawed plan.
Exactly. We
Yeah.
need a system that honors that energy by directing it toward reality.
So let's try to visualize the mechanics of this difference just to make it really concrete.
Great idea.
Think about traditional general management like driving a massive freight train.
A freight trade, okay.
Right. The tracks were laid down decades ago. The route from, say, Chicago to New York is permanently set in steel.
It's fixed.
Right. Your entire job as the manager, as the conductor of that train, is optimization and efficiency.
You're just managing the execution.
Exactly. You're making sure the train departs at exactly 8:00 a.m. You're meticulously managing the fuel burn rate per mile, and you're ensuring the cargo arrives undamaged.
It's a highly predictable system.
Yeah.
And in that system, any deviation from the track is a literal disaster.
It's a train wreck.
Literally. If a train decides to pivot
Yeah.
and take a sharp left turn off the rails to explore a new path, it derails.
Yeah.
So the entire management structure is designed to completely prevent deviation.
Exactly. Keep the train on the tracks at all costs.
Right.
But managing a startup or launching a highly uncertain project is not a train on a track.
No, not at all.
It's more like off-roading in an uncharted, dense jungle in a Jeep.
I love that analogy.
There are no tracks. There are no maps. You have a general direction you want to go. Maybe you want to reach the ocean on the other side of the jungle, but you have literally no idea what is 10 feet in front of you.
Right.
Now, just because you are off-roading in a messy environment doesn't mean you throw your hands in the air and say, well, it's chaotic out here, so I guess I don't need a steering wheel.
I don't need brakes.
Right. I don't need any process for driving.
If you do that, you're just going to crash into the first tree you see.
Exactly. You still need the mechanics of navigation. You still need a management system.
You do.
But those mechanics are entirely different from the ones used to drive the train. You aren't optimizing fuel efficiency to the third decimal point. You are learning how to read the unpredictable terrain.
Right, you're adapting.
You need a process for recovering when the Jeep gets stuck in a mud pit. You need a systematic way to reverse and pivot when your path is suddenly blocked by a massive boulder.
The vehicle exists, the destination exists, but the moment-to-moment management of the journey requires a completely different cognitive toolset.
A completely different mindset.
You trade the rigid optimization of the train for the rapid adaptability of the Jeep.
So for you listening to this right now, the practical application is all about situational awareness.
Yes. Know where you are.
You must learn to identify when you are operating in a state of extreme uncertainty. If you're launching a new software product, starting a neighborhood bakery with a totally new concept, or leading a corporate initiative where there is no historical precedent, you are in the Jeep.
You are off-roading.
You are off-roading, and the moment you realize that, you have to stop acting like a train conductor.
Throw away the train manual.
Yes. Immediately throw out the traditional business plans. Stop writing those 40-page documents detailing exactly what your market share will be in year 3.
Because you just don't know.
You don't know, and pretending you do is actually dangerous. Instead, you need to adopt entrepreneurial management.
And this brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of this entire philosophy, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. This is wild.
It's about where this entrepreneurial management actually comes from.
Right.
Because the DNA of the modern startup methodology is not what you would expect at all.
It really isn't. I mean, when we hear terms like lean startup or agile development, we naturally assume these concepts were dreamed up in like a sleek, glass-walled software incubator in Silicon Valley sometime in the early 2000s.
Right, we assume it's a product of the internet age.
Exactly. But it's not. Where does this actually originate?
It traces its origins all the way back to the gritty, physical factory floors of post-World War II Japan.
Wait, really? Japan? Factory floors?
Yeah, exactly. Specifically, the lean startup is a direct descendant of the Toyota production system.
Wow.
It was pioneered by brilliant engineers like Taiichi Ohno and Shigeo Shingo in the mid-20th century.
Okay, so we are not talking about writing code or designing apps here.
No, we're talking about the heavy manufacturing of actual physical automobiles and car parts. This is the birthplace of what became known globally as lean manufacturing.
It is genuinely wild to think that the cutting-edge tech world, you know, the people building artificial intelligence and social networks, are basically running a playbook written by auto manufacturing plant managers from the 1950s.
It feels totally counterintuitive until you look at the underlying mechanics of what Toyota actually achieved.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, they were operating in a post-war economy with severe resource constraints. They couldn't afford to waste anything.
Right, they had to be efficient.
So they developed principles that profoundly altered how human beings think about production and supply chains.
Like what?
They introduced revolutionary concepts like shrinking batch sizes.
Shrinking batch sizes.
Yeah. In traditional American mass manufacturing at the time, the logic was economies of scale, right?
Like make a ton of stuff all at once because it's cheaper.
Exactly. Make 10,000 car doors at once because it's cheaper per door. But Toyota realized that if there was a flaw in the design or the machine, you just ruined 10,000 doors before anyone even noticed.
Oh, wow, that's a massive amount of waste.
Right. So by shrinking the batch size making just a small number of doors, inspecting them, and then adjusting the machine,
Sure.
you catch defects instantly.
Okay, so you sacrifice a little bit of theoretical, localized efficiency for a massive gain in overall system quality and adaptability.
Exactly. And they also pioneered just-in-time inventory control,
Which means,
meaning you don't let massive piles of unused parts just sit on the factory floor gathering dust. Parts arrive exactly when the assembly line needs them.
right, so you're not paying to store stuff you aren't using yet.
Exactly. But the absolute core of the Toyota production system, the most vital philosophical leap that the lean startup borrows, was teaching the workforce how to clearly differentiate value-creating activities from waste.
Value versus waste.
Yes.
Okay, this is where the translation from physical cars to, like, invisible ideas gets really interesting.
And frankly, really difficult.
Yeah, because in a traditional physical factory, progress is incredibly easy to see and measure, right?
It can literally cut you.
Exactly. You can walk out onto the floor and see high-quality physical goods rolling off the assembly line. You can count the cars. The value is tangible.
Right.
But think about the startup you're building or that ambiguous new project you're managing at work. Progress is largely invisible.
It's just knowledge work.
It's all knowledge work. If you spend 6 straight months sitting at their desk writing tens of thousands of lines of code or crafting this incredibly detailed marketing strategy, and the final result is a piece of software or a service that absolutely nobody wants to buy.
Then what have you actually produced?
Exactly. What did you do? In the eyes of lean manufacturing, that isn't progress.
No, it's not.
That is the ultimate heartbreaking definition of waste.
And that realization requires a monumental shift in how we define the purpose of a new venture.
Right.
In an established factory, making the product is the goal. But in a startup operating under extreme uncertainty, making the product is not the primary goal.
Wait, making the product isn't the goal?
No. The goal of a startup is to figure out the right thing to build in the first place.
Oh, I see.
The goal is to discover the thing that customers actually want and will willingly pay for. Therefore, the unit of progress in a startup cannot be measured in stuff.
So it's not lines of code written?
Nope. It's not hours logged at the office. It's not the number of features pushed to the live website.
So what is it?
The new metric for progress, the only metric that actually matters when you're off-roading, is what the source material calls validated learning.
Validated learning.
Yes?
That phrase just fundamentally changes the entire psychological landscape of work.
It really does.
I want to speak directly to the listener here because this is something I struggled with for years personally.
Oh, absolutely. Me too.
If you internalize this concept, you have to completely, radically change how you measure a good day at work.
It's so hard to do.
Because I know the exact feeling of traditional productivity. I used to think a good day was sitting at my desk for 8 uninterrupted hours, head down, noise-canceling headphones on, just furiously cranking out work.
Checking every single box off the to-do list.
Yes, and I'd feel exhausted, but I felt productive. At 5:00 p.m., I could point to a thick stack of finalized reports or a meticulously designed presentation deck and say, look what I made today. I earned my paycheck.
It is a deeply ingrained psychological habit.
It really is.
We're trained from elementary school onward to evaluate our productivity locally and tangibly. We want a gold star for finishing the worksheet.
Exactly. We want the gold star.
Right. If you're a software engineer, a good day is writing elegant code. If you're a graphic designer, a good day is producing beautiful wireframes.
Because they're tangible.
Exactly. Code and design files are tangible things. We can look at them, we understand their complexity, and we can show them off to our bosses as proof of our labor.
Right. But learning, on the other hand, learning is frustratingly intangible.
It doesn't look like much on a timesheet.
It really doesn't. But the danger is that if you are in a state of extreme uncertainty, if you're in the jungle, cranking out beautiful work for a product that no one has actually validated is worse than doing nothing.
It's actively harmful.
It's essentially driving your Jeep 100 miles an hour in the completely wrong direction.
Yes, you're moving fast, but
The engine sounds great, you feel like you're making good time, but you are actually getting further away from your destination.
exactly. So what does a good day actually look like in entrepreneurial management?
Right. What is the alternative?
A good day isn't just executing a plan. A good day is discovering what the customer actually values.
Discovering value.
Yes. And here is the hardest part. Even if that discovery means you realize the brilliant code you wrote yesterday is entirely useless, and you have to highlight it all and hit delete.
Oh, that hurts.
It hurts so much. But throwing away work because you systematically learned it's the wrong work is not a failure.
Right.
In a startup, that is a massive celebrated victory.
Which is why this is such a difficult transition for experienced professionals, isn't it?
Oh, it requires you to substitute the psychological comfort of producing tangible stuff with the often uncomfortable, ego-bruising reality of seeking the objective truth about your business model.
The objective truth.
Yeah, when you adopt validated learning as your primary yardstick, you stop arguing in conference rooms about whose idea is better, and you start running experiments.
You let reality decide.
Exactly. With that scientific learning, you can systematically discover and eliminate the invisible sources of waste that kill so many promising ventures.
Okay, so we've established this crucial concept of validated learning. We know we aren't just making stuff, we are running experiments to learn what to make.
Right.
But how does that actually function mechanically on, like, a random Tuesday morning?
How do you actually do it?
Yeah, how do all the moving parts of a startup work together to generate that learning?
Well, the source material provides a brilliant extended metaphor for this, pulling us back into the automotive world.
Yeah, okay, I love a good metaphor. Let's do it.
Let's talk about Henry Ford, long before the assembly lines, back when he was just a guy tinkering in his garage.
Okay, early days Henry Ford.
It's a very fitting metaphor, considering how deeply management theory has been intertwined with the automobile industry for a century.
Right, from Toyota to Ford.
Exactly. Think about the mechanical reality of an internal combustion engine automobile. It is not a static object. It is a dynamic system powered by two very distinct yet interconnected feedback loops.
Okay, 2 feedback loops. Let's pop the hood and break those down. What is the first one?
The first feedback loop operates deep inside the engine block itself. Long before Henry Ford was a wealthy CEO, he was a mechanic. He spent his nights in a tiny garage in Detroit, obsessively tinkering with the internal mechanics of getting engine cylinders to fire correctly.
Just trying to make the thing run.
Right. Think about how an engine works. Each tiny controlled explosion within the cylinder provides the raw physical force to turn the wheels.
Okay.
But crucially, that same explosion also provides the momentum to drive the ignition of the next explosion in the sequence.
Oh, I see. It feeds itself.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
continuous, self-sustaining loop. And unless the timing, the fuel mixture, and the air intake of this feedback loop are managed with absolute precision, the engine will sputter, stall, and completely break down.
Okay, so how does this relate to the startup?
In the lean startup framework, a new venture has a very similar internal mechanism, which is called the engine of growth.
The engine of growth.
Right.
Okay, so if we map the mechanics of those micro explosions in the cylinders onto the day-to-day reality of our startup,
Right.
those explosions represent the small, daily, iterative improvements we make to our business.
Exactly. It's the constant granular work.
Like tweaking the subject line of a marketing email to see if open rates increase.
Yes.
Or adding a slightly more intuitive checkout button to your e-commerce site.
Or adjusting the script your sales team uses on cold calls.
Right. Every new version of your product, every tiny update is an attempt to optimize this internal engine.
You're standing in the garage, covered in grease, tuning the engine, trying to get the whole machine to run just a little bit smoother, a little bit faster, and with better fuel efficiency.
Okay, that makes total sense.
And the vast majority of a team's time in the lifespan of a startup is spent right there, under the hood, tuning that engine of growth.
Just constantly tinkering.
You're constantly making micro adjustments in product development, marketing channels, and internal operations to see if those changes yield a measurable improvement.
Measuring how the business acquires and retains customers.
Exactly. But while the engine provides the forward momentum, It is utterly useless without the second, equally important feedback loop in an automobile.
Which is the steering wheel.
Precisely. The feedback loop between the driver's hands, their eyes, the steering mechanism, and the road.
Ah, okay.
This is the crucial element that differentiates driving a vehicle from being a passenger on that train track we discussed earlier.
Right. Think about the mechanics of your daily commute to work, right?
Okay.
You've driven this exact route so many times that your hands steer the car almost automatically.
Yeah, muscle memory.
You know every curve, every stoplight, you're optimizing for time. But imagine you're driving along, tuning your engine of growth, making great time, and suddenly you round a corner and see a giant reflective orange road closed sign blocking all 4 lanes.
The dreaded detour.
Right. There is a massive sinkhole in the road. A complete detour.
Okay.
When you see that sign, you don't just stop your car in the middle of the road, turn off the ignition, slump over the steering wheel and say, well, the commute is ruined, the original plan failed, I guess I'll just live in my car now.
Or turn around and go back to bed.
Right. Nor do you simply press the accelerator down harder and blindly drive your car straight into the sinkhole just because the road was clear yesterday.
Right. Just because moving forward was part of your original, highly optimized business plan.
Exactly. That would be insane.
Totally insane.
What you do is use the immediate, real-world feedback from your environment, the visual data of the closed road, and you turn the steering wheel.
You change your route.
You change your route.
Right.
You use the feedback loop of the steering wheel to adjust your path in real time, avoiding the obstacle while still keeping your ultimate destination in mind.
Right. You still want to get to the office. You haven't abandoned your goal.
No, you're just taking a different street to get there.
If we elevate this mechanical metaphor into the broader picture of business strategy, we can visualize it as a 3-tiered triangle.
Okay, a triangle. Paint that picture for me.
At the very base of the triangle, forming the absolute unshakable foundation, is the vision.
The vision.
This is your ultimate destination, your true north. This is the reason you started the company.
Right, like you want to revolutionize how people learn languages, or you want to eliminate single-use plastics.
Exactly. That core vision rarely, if ever, changes. You remain fiercely committed to it.
So in the commute analogy, the vision is the office building you're trying to reach, the physical destination.
Exactly.
Oh.
So sitting directly above the vision in our triangle is the strategy.
The strategy. Okay.
Strategy encompasses your business model, your long-term product roadmap, your hypotheses about who your ideal customer is, and how you plan to reach them.
Okay, so this is your route. This is the specific highway you chose for your commute.
Precisely. And just like on a physical road, if you hit a massive roadblock, if you realize your target demographic actually has no money to spend, or a competitor launches a free version of your tool, the strategy has to change.
You have to turn the wheel.
You execute a pivot.
The pivot. Man, this is a word that has been thrown around so much in business culture that it has almost lost its meaning completely.
Oh, it really has.
People use it to describe everything from changing their logo font to, like, firing their entire staff.
Right. It's become a catch-all buzzword.
But this framework contextualizes it perfectly. A pivot isn't a chaotic flailing.
No.
A pivot is simply turning the steering wheel when the current road is blocked. It's a structured, deliberate change in strategy designed to test a new path without ever abandoning the foundational vision.
It's a change in course, grounded in learning.
It's grounded in learning.
I like that. And then finally, at the very top of our triangle, resting on top of the strategy, is the product. The product is the end result of the strategy. It's the physical manifestation of your current assumptions.
So in our analogy, it's the actual driving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because it sits at the top, the product changes constantly through the relentless process of optimization.
That's the daily tuning of the engine we talked about earlier.
You got it.
This breakdown is so clarifying. Because what does this actually mean for you, the listener, who is trying to get a project off the ground right now?
It's a huge shift in perspective.
The practical takeaway here is profound, and it's something that could literally save you years of heartache.
Right.
And it's this. You must never, ever confuse your product with your vision.
Never.
They are not the same thing. Your product is not your vision. Your product is merely the current vehicle you happen to be using to try and achieve the vision.
Right.
If your current product is failing, if nobody's downloading the app, if nobody's buying the service, it's just a detour sign on the road.
That's all it is.
It does not mean your overarching vision is wrong. It just means the route you chose is blocked.
So what do?
You don't give up. You pivot the strategy, you tune the engine, you launch a new iteration of the product, but you stay fiercely, stubbornly committed to that ultimate true north.
I mean, decoupling your personal identity from the first iteration of your product is a psychological superpower for an entrepreneur.
A superpower, that's exactly what it is.
Because if you wrap your entire ego, your self-worth, and your grand vision up in version 1.0 of your software, and the market inevitably rejects it because it's flawed,
Which it will be.
you'll feel personally destroyed. You'll become defensive. You'll blame the customers for not getting it.
Market is just stupid.
Exactly. But if you embrace entrepreneurial management, you view that product merely as an initial experiment designed to test your strategy.
So a failure isn't an indictment of your genius.
No, it's simply a data point. It is the road objectively telling you to turn the wheel.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the mechanics of how a startup operates. We know it off-roads rather than rides on tracks.
Right.
We know it prioritizes validated learning over producing waste. We know it tunes its engine of growth and steers via the pivot.
Yes.
But we haven't actually stopped to define what a startup is.
That is a very good point.
And I think this is a critical juncture because this is where a massive percentage of people completely count themselves out of the game before they even step onto the field.
They self-select out.
They do. They look at the mythology and think, well, I don't wear a hoodie, I'm not 22, and I don't have venture capital funding, so none of this applies to me.
But they do.
Yeah.
And it is a massive loss of potential innovation when they think like that.
So how do we fix it?
We need to look closely at the true, precise definition of a startup, as explicitly outlined in the source material.
Okay.
It is a single sentence, but every single word carries immense weight.
Let's hear it.
Quote, "A startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty."
Okay, let me repeat that because it is the anchor of this entire philosophy. A startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Yes.
Let's break down the mechanics of every single word in that definition because it is loaded with implications.
Let's start with the word institution.
Okay, institution.
When most people hear the word institution, they immediately think of bureaucracy, rigid processes, maybe even lethargy.
Yeah, it sounds like a government agency or the DMV.
Right. So how can a nimble, disruptive startup be an institution?
That's a great question.
It's an institution because successful startups are never just about a lone genius having a sudden epiphany in a vacuum.
The myth again?
Right. Building a company requires building an organization. It requires hiring intelligent, creative employees, coordinating their complex activities, establishing a company culture, and building systems that deliver consistent results.
So from day one, you are building a human enterprise. It's a team sport.
Exactly. You aren't just building a product, you are building the machine that builds the product.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the word product itself? Because in the tech world, we just assume that means software or an app.
The author specifically uses the broadest possible definition of the word product.
Broadest possible.
In this context, a product encompasses any source of value for the people who eventually become your customers.
Anything.
Anything those customers experience during their interaction with your company is part of the product.
Okay, so give me some examples.
This could be a physical consumer good, a specialized consulting service, an e-commerce platform, or even an internal software tool used only by employees at a large company.
Wow. It could even be a nonprofit, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
Like if you're starting a nonprofit agency attempting to solve the homelessness crisis in your city using a completely new, untested methodology, the value you provide to that community is your product.
Right.
You are still building a human institution to deliver it. You are a startup.
Yes. The tax status of the organization doesn't change the operational mechanics of the uncertainty.
Okay. Which brings us to the final and most vital part of the definition.
The defining factor.
The thing that separates a startup from a traditional business.
Right.
Under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
This is the environmental context in which the innovation must happen.
Okay, let me push back here by bringing up a very common scenario.
All right.
Let's say I want to finally leave the corporate world and start my own business. I want to be my own boss.
Oh, good.
I drive down the street and I see a wildly popular, highly profitable, global coffee shop chain.
Well, know the one.
Right. I decide to take out a massive loan, buy a franchise license, and open a carbon copy of that exact coffee shop 2 towns over.
Okay.
I have to hire a team, I have to manage complex inventory, I have to run local marketing, and I have to deal with demanding customers. I am definitely starting a business. I am an entrepreneur taking a risk. Am I a startup?
Under this strict definition, no, you are not a startup.
But why not? I put my house on the line for the bank loan. I'm taking a huge risk.
You are absolutely taking a significant personal and financial risk, and it is hard work.
Extremely hard work.
But, and this is the crucial distinction, you are not operating under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Oh, because the model already works.
Think about the mechanics of opening that franchise. The success of that coffee shop relies almost entirely on your ability to execute a known, deeply proven business model.
Right. They hand you a playbook.
You know exactly who the customer is before you open the doors. You know exactly what product they want. They want the same latte they get everywhere else.
Yeah.
You know the exact pricing structure that the market will bear. You are handed a binder with the exact supply chain logistics, the employee training manuals, and the marketing templates.
It's so predictable that, as you mentioned earlier, I can literally walk into a traditional bank, hand the loan officer the franchise prospectus, and they can run it through an algorithm to assess the risk and give me the money.
Exactly.
Right.
A bank can do that because the uncertainty is incredibly low.
I am just driving a slightly newer train on tracks that have been laid down for 30 years.
Perfectly said. It requires excellent traditional management, but it is not a startup because you are not searching for a business model, you are executing one.
Now, who is a startup then?
Well, the sources tell this fascinating story about a man named Mark.
Oh, Mark.
Mark shatters every stereotype we have about who an entrepreneur is.
Yeah.
We really need to dissect Mark's situation because he represents a massive demographic of invisible founders.
Yes, Mark is the perfect case study.
Yeah.
Because if you look at Mark on paper, he does not fit the dorm room mythology at all.
Not even a little bit.
Mark is a high-level manager working deep inside an extremely large, established legacy corporation.
Right.
We're talking about a massive Fortune 500-style enterprise with decades of history. Mark is a smart guy, and he is the leader of a division that was recently given a very specific charter: bring this legacy company into the 21st century by building a brand new suite of internet products.
That's a big task.
He has a massive budget. He has handpicked a superstar team of developers and designers. He has a strong, compelling vision for the future of the division. And he has the backing of a globally recognized brand name.
Right. If you pass Mark in the hallway, he is the ultimate suit.
Oh, yeah, full corporate suit.
He is fully embedded in the corporate machine. And he isn't naive either. When he sits down to meet with Eric Ries, he is already well-versed in the academic theories of disruptive
He
innovation.
knows his stuff.
He knows exactly how to navigate treacherous corporate politics. He has all the traditional tools of management at his disposal.
So with all of those advantages, budget, team, brand, knowledge, what is his problem? Why is he struggling?
Well, when you look at the mechanics of his situation, he describes it perfectly. He uses a brilliant analogy.
What is it?
He says, it's as if we have all of the raw materials for a fire. We have the kindling, we have the wood, the paper, the flint, even some sparks. But where's the fire?
Where's the fire?
He feels like he's working inside what he calls the black box of innovation.
The black box.
Right. He has the institutional structure to form an internal startup team.
Yeah.
He has the raw materials, but he has absolutely no idea what process to use to actually convert those materials into a breakthrough success. He knows general management won't work for these new internet products, but he doesn't know what replaces it.
He has the institution, but he lacks the entrepreneurial management operating system.
Exactly. But here is the massive paradigm-shifting takeaway from Mark's story.
What is it?
Despite the suit, despite the corporate badge, despite the massive budget, Mark is just as much an entrepreneur as the rebel kids in the Silicon Valley garage.
Really?
Yes. He is what we call an entrepreneur operating inside the ecosystem of a larger company.
Right.
But because his specific project is attempting to create a completely new product for a new market under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Right, because his legacy company has never built internet products like this before, so they have no historical data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He is, by definition, leading a startup.
The methodology makes it incredibly clear. Entrepreneur is not a mystical job title reserved only for people who drop out of college, max out their credit cards, and move to California.
Thank goodness it isn't.
Right. Entrepreneur should be an official, recognized job title in all modern companies that depend on innovation for their future survival.
Absolutely.
The size of your parent company, the specific industry you work in, the sector of the economy, whether it's government, nonprofit, or corporate, none of that fundamentally matters to the mechanics of innovation.
None of it.
If you're tasked with creating new value where the outcome is entirely unknown, you are an entrepreneur.
And that realization requires a complete shift in how those internal projects are governed.
So I want you, the listener, to pause and look at your current reality.
Take a good look.
Look at the most important project sitting on your desk right now. Look at your day job. You do not need to quit your job and risk your life savings to be a founder.
You really don't.
If your boss hands you a vague initiative and says, "We've never entered this market before, we don't know if our current customers will even want this new service, but we need to figure it out," you are no longer just a project manager.
You're operating a startup within that company.
You are Mark. You are a founder.
Exactly.
And therefore, you absolutely must apply these rules of entrepreneurial management. You cannot use the tools of the train to navigate the jungle.
It just won't work.
You must prioritize validated learning over blindly executing a rigid top-down plan.
And to prove that this isn't just theoretical, we have a phenomenal, highly detailed, real-world case study from the source material.
Oh, this is my favorite part of the chapter.
It illustrates exactly what happens mechanically when a massive, established company realizes they are operating in the jungle, embraces this startup identity, and completely changes their internal rules.
Yes, this is arguably the most powerful story in the chapter. It's the story of Intuit and the creation of a product called SnapTax.
SnapTax.
This case study is a masterclass in how to build an actual innovation factory inside a corporate behemoth.
Let's set the stage by looking at the company first.
Sure.
Intuit is a massive, incredibly successful financial software company. They are famous for flagship products like TurboTax and QuickBooks.
Everyone knows them.
Right. They have thousands of employees and billions in revenue. They are the absolute definition of an established, heavily entrenched, well-managed corporation.
They are the train.
They are the ultimate train.
Right.
And they are guided by their highly respected founder, Scott Cook.
Right.
But in 2009, a small, internal startup team within Intuit decided to try something completely audacious.
What did they want to do?
They looked at the market and wanted to liberate taxpayers from the drudgery of data entry and the expense of going to retail tax preparation storefronts.
Noble goal.
Very. Their initial vision was to automate the tedious process of collecting financial information from standard W-2 forms.
Which, if you have ever done your taxes, sounds like a brilliant idea on paper. Who wants to type in dozens of tiny numbers from a paper form?
Nobody. It's miserable.
It really is. But when this team actually started trying to execute this idea, they immediately hit a wall.
Big wall.
Their initial strategy, their first route on the map, was built on the assumption that customers would just use the flatbed scanners they had in their home offices to scan the W-2s.
It seems like a logical assumption for 2009.
It does. But because they followed the principles of entrepreneurial management, they didn't just spend 2 years building the software in a vacuum.
Right. They didn't just stay in the garage.
They did something crucial. They got out of the building.
The most important step.
They actually talked to potential customers and watched them try to use the prototype. And what did they learn?
They learned that their core assumption was completely, hilariously wrong.
Wow.
They realized that average consumers either didn't have scanners, or if they did, they had absolutely no idea how to use them.
Or how to connect them to the computer.
Exactly. Or where the scanned files were even saved, once they finally got it to work.
Oh, man. The strategy was blocked by a massive roadblock. The home scanner was a dead end.
A total sinkhole in the road.
Now, traditional management might have looked at that failure and shut the project down.
Well, the scanner idea failed. Pack it up.
Right. But this team was holding the steering wheel. Based on that direct, validated feedback from the real world, they pivoted. They turned the wheel.
Yes.
They kept their vision liberating the taxpayer, but they changed the strategy. They lit upon a new idea. What if, instead of a clunky scanner, we have customers take photographs of their W-2 forms directly from their cell phone?
Which was revolutionary at the time. And here's where the mechanics of innovation truly shine.
Okay, what happened next?
In the process of testing that new mobile photo concept, they were out in the field again, talking to customers, showing them this new camera feature.
Or validated learning.
Exactly. And during those conversations, the customers asked them a question that the Intuit team had never even anticipated.
What was the question?
The customers looked at the phone and said, okay, taking a picture of the form is great, but why do I have to transfer this data back to my computer? Can I just do my whole tax return right here on the phone?
Wow, that one question, born entirely from interacting with real people, birthed SnapTax.
Yes, it did.
It was a standalone app that allowed people with simple returns to do their taxes entirely on their mobile devices. And it became a blockbuster success.
Massive success.
But what is absolutely vital to understand here is why SnapTax succeeded.
Right.
It was not just a lucky guess by a smart developer. It wasn't the genetic lottery of having a genius employee who had a shower thought.
No, it wasn't magic.
SnapTax was the direct mechanical result of a deliberate, systemic, and frankly painful change in Intuit's internal corporate culture.
To appreciate the magnitude of this, we really have to look at the mechanics of how Intuit used to operate versus how they operate now.
Okay, lay it out for us.
For a massive financial product like TurboTax, the entire corporate sales cycle is heavily concentrated around tax season in the United States.
Right, it's a very short window.
Historically, because of the high stakes, they had developed an extremely conservative, risk-averse culture.
Which makes sense when you're dealing with taxes.
Totally. Over the course of a whole year, the product teams would conceive of one major initiative, one big, shiny new version of the software. They would spend 12 months building it, testing it internally, and then they would roll the whole thing out just in time for tax season.
It is the classic waterfall approach to management.
Yes.
You spend a year gathering massive bundles of kindling, you build one giant bomb of a product, you launch it to millions of people on a single day, and you collectively hold your breath, praying that the market actually wants it.
It is incredibly stressful, and if you are wrong, you have wasted a year of engineering time.
A whole year.
Scott Cook realized that relying on a single, massive, monolithic release was far too risky and far too slow for the modern, rapidly changing economy.
It's just too fragile.
He recognized that the traditional management structures that made Intuit successful in the 1990s were completely inadequate for continuous innovation in the 2000s.
So what did he do?
He drove a complete systemic overhaul. They moved away from that one giant, terrifying release.
Okay.
Instead, they built an infrastructure that allowed them to run over 500 different localized experiments in a brief 2.5-month tax season.
500 experiments.
Unbelievable.
Let's pause and do the math on the mechanics of that because it is staggering.
Yeah, let's look at the numbers.
If they are running 500 experiments over roughly 10 weeks, that means they are running up to 50 or 70 different tests every single week.
Every week.
A product team can come up with a hypothesis on Wednesday. They can code a small change and push it live to a subset of users on the website on Thursday.
They let the experiment run over the weekend.
Gathering real behavioral data. On Monday, they read the analytics. On Tuesday, they draw conclusions about what worked and what failed. On Wednesday, they build the next iteration based on that learning, and they launch it again Thursday night.
That is the build, measure, learn feedback loop spinning at absolute hyperspeed inside a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
It's incredible.
And we really have to emphasize the technical and organizational mechanisms required to make that possible.
Right, because you can't just wing that.
You can't just tell a team of developers to go run 500 experiments on live financial software during tax season without a safety net.
If an experiment breaks the tax return of 1 million people, the company is ruined.
Exactly. So what did senior management do? Their role fundamentally changed.
How so?
Scott Cook has a brilliant, illuminating quote about this transition. He realized that the bottleneck for innovation isn't the teams or the entrepreneurs. The employees love getting their ideas out there to be tested.
So what's the blockage?
The real issue, the blockage, is the leadership structure. Cook said that corporate leadership needs to stop playing Caesar with their thumbs up and down on every idea.
Stop playing Caesar! Wow!
Right.
That paints such a vivid, accurate picture of corporate culture. You picture the traditional executive sitting on a leather chair in a boardroom throne, listening to PowerPoint pitches.
Yep, the pitch meeting.
The team presents an idea, and Caesar relies entirely on his gut instinct, his past experience, and maybe his ego to decide, yes, this is a good idea, fund it. No, that is a bad idea, kill it.
But in a startup environment, in the jungle of extreme uncertainty, Caesar's gut instinct is statistically meaningless
It's useless.
because Caesar has never been in this specific part of the jungle before.
Yeah.
His past experience driving the train does not help him navigate the mud.
Exactly. Innovation is fundamentally a bottom-up, unpredictable, decentralized process.
Yes.
When you embrace entrepreneurial management, the job of senior management changes drastically.
Their job is no longer to be the ultimate judge and jury of which ideas will win the market.
Right, so what is their job?
Their job is to build the systems that allow those ideas to be tested safely.
Ah,
Intuit invested heavily in the technical infrastructure, the sandboxing environments, the split testing code, the real-time analytics dashboards, the automated deployment systems that allow their teams to run those 500 experiments safely and rapidly without risking the core business.
they built the laboratory so the scientists could actually do their work.
Precisely.
So here is the immediate practical takeaway for anyone listening to this who manages a team, leads a department, or even just runs a small agency.
Listen up.
Stop acting like Caesar.
Stop it.
Stop wasting your cognitive energy and your team's time trying to play Oracle, trying to pick the winners and losers in sterile conference rooms.
You don't know the answers.
You don't know the answers, and pretending you do creates a culture of sycophancy where people just try to build what the boss wants instead of what the customer actually wants.
Which is the ultimate waste.
It is. Shift your energy away from judging ideas and pour all of it into building an experimentation system. Give your team the tools, the psychological safety, and the technical infrastructure to test their crazy ideas against real customer behavior quickly and cheaply.
Let the reality of the customer decide if the idea is good, not your ego.
Exactly.
When a leader builds an innovation factory like that, you are creating the fertile conditions that enable everyday employees to do the kinds of relentless experimentation that true entrepreneurship requires.
You strip away the toxic corporate politics.
You strip away the endless debates over opinions and you replace it with objective science.
Okay, we have covered an incredible amount of philosophical and mechanical ground today,
We really have.
and we've fundamentally redefined some major concepts. Let's synthesize all of these moving parts so you, the listener, can walk away with a clear, actionable mental model.
Let's bring it all together.
We started by tearing down the cinematic myth of the rogue, chaotic genius. We saw how traditional management, which relies on historical forecasts and absolute stability, is a brilliant tool for driving a train, but it's completely useless and actually dangerous for the extreme uncertainty of a new venture.
We trace the unexpected roots of a better way all the way back to post-war lean manufacturing in Japan.
We learned to reevaluate our daily work, separating the ego-driven production of tangible stuff from the relentless pursuit of validated learning.
We redefine waste not as inefficiency, but as building something perfectly that nobody actually wants.
We used the mechanics of the automobile engine to understand that we need an internal engine of growth to tune every single day, but we also must keep our hands firmly on the steering wheel, ready to pivot our strategy when the road is blocked.
All while staying fiercely, stubbornly true to our ultimate foundational vision.
We established a rigorous, precise definition of what an entrepreneur actually is. Anyone in any industry building a new human institution under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
We proved that Mark, the corporate suit, is just as much a founder as the kid in the garage.
And finally, we saw through the Intuit case study how massive companies are surviving the modern era by stopping their leaders from playing Caesar and instead building robust technical and cultural systems for rapid, safe experimentation.
So if we take all of these disparate threads, all of these mechanical metaphors, and we tie them together into one single, memorable insight that represents the true soul of this chapter.
What is it?
It is this. Innovation is not a genetic lottery.
It's not.
It is not a magical spark bestowed upon a chosen few. And it is not simply a matter of being in the right place at the right time with the lucky guess.
Right.
Entrepreneurship is a highly disciplined, rigorous management science designed specifically and intentionally for the chaos of extreme uncertainty.
By actively choosing to treat your venture as a grand, measurable experiment rather than a guaranteed, pre-written business plan, you do something incredibly powerful.
You strip away your own ego.
You strip away your ego. You stop trying to force the market to bend to your brilliant idea, and you align yourself completely with reality.
You let the objective truth of human behavior guide your hands on the steering wheel.
If we were to leave the listener with one final provocative thought to mull over before they open their laptop again.
I have a challenge for them.
Oh, let's hear it.
Look closely at your most important, most stressful current project. the thing you are spending your days and nights on. Look at the mechanics of how you are managing it.
Okay.
Are you currently blinding yourself to the truth, obsessively optimizing an engine that is driving you 100 miles an hour straight into a brick wall, simply because you are terrified to deviate from the original business plan? Or
Whoa.
are you actually awake, holding the steering wheel, running experiments, and ready to pivot based on what the real-world road is telling you?
That is the perfect, uncomfortable question to ask yourself today. Are you driving the train hoping the tracks don't end, or are you actively navigating the Jeep?
It's a tough question, but it's the only one that matters.
Now, we know that validated learning is our ultimate goal when we are off-roading in the unknown. We know we need to seek the truth.
Right.
But let's be completely honest with ourselves for a second. Learning is also the oldest, most convenient excuse in the corporate playbook for failing to hit your target.
Oh, absolutely. It's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card.
Right. When a project completely faceplants, when the app launches to 0 users and the budget is entirely gone, it is really easy to sit in the postmortem meeting and tell your boss or your investors, well, the product failed and we didn't make a single dollar of revenue. But hey, we learned a lot.
We learned so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't usually fly for very long.
It doesn't. So how do you differentiate true scientific validated learning from just making excuses?
That's the big question.
How do you prove mathematically and objectively to your boss, your investors, or most importantly to yourself that you are actually making real progress and not just goofing off in the garage?
Well, you're going to have to wait for the next chapter for that.
Exactly. Next time, we dive deep into the specific metrics and the exact antidote to startup failure, the mechanical framework of validated learning. We are going to separate the vanity metrics from the truth. You absolutely won't want to miss it.
It's going to be a good one.
Until then, remember, look up from the dashboard, look at the road, and keep your hands on the wheel. See you next time on The Deep Dive. So picture an entrepreneur in your head right now. Like, what do you actually see?
I'm guessing it's the classic Silicon Valley stereotype.
Exactly, yeah. If you're like most people, you're probably picturing this very specific movie montage. It's a 20-something kid in a hoodie.
Fueled entirely by energy drinks.
Right, sitting in a dimly lit garage surrounded by empty pizza boxes, furiously coding the next billion-dollar app.
It's a powerful image.
It is, but we have completely romanticized this idea that entrepreneurship is a personality type, or like a genetic trait, or just a phase of reckless youth.
Yeah, we treat it like a rare blood type or something.
Totally. But I want to ask you something. What if that specific image is actually the biggest barrier to your next big breakthrough? What if you are an entrepreneur right now, even if you're commuting to a massive bureaucratic corporation or working in some government agency and you don't even realize it?
That is exactly what we are getting into today. We really need to completely deconstruct the words startup and entrepreneur.
Because it's about more than just the garage.
So much more. If we can move past those tired stereotypes, it totally changes the playbook for how we manage innovation. Because, well, the reality is that anyone who is trying to build something entirely new while facing extreme uncertainty, they need a radically different management approach.
Right, because what they teach in a standard MBA program just doesn't cut it.
It doesn't. Traditional business logic basically breaks down when you don't actually know what the future looks like. So for this deep dive, we're going to break down exactly what makes an entrepreneur, according to the source material.
And I love this framing because, for me at least, it immediately takes the pressure off. Like, you don't have to be some visionary genius who drops out of college to be an entrepreneur.
No, not at all.
And to really ground this, I want to look at one of the central figures from the work we're exploring today. His name is Mark.
Mark is a great example.
Yeah, and Mark is about as far from a garage-dwelling, hoodie-wearing college kid as you can possibly get. I mean, he is the complete opposite.
He really is. Mark is sort of the quintessential corporate insider. He's a general manager at a massive, well-established legacy company.
We're talking suits, corner office, the whole deal.
Exactly. And his specific mandate from the CEO is to bring this lumbering corporate giant into the 21st century.
No pressure, right?
Right. He's supposed to do this by creating a brand new suite of internet-based products.
And what's so compelling about Mark's story, I think, is that he wasn't doing this blindly. Like, he had read all the classic management theory.
Oh, yeah, he was highly educated on the subject.
He was intimately familiar with Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma.
Which is basically the Bible for this kind of corporate innovation
Yeah,
problem.
exactly. So he knew the trap that big companies fall into.
Yeah.
That trap where their core profitable business ends up basically suffocating any new risky ideas.
Because the core business demands predictability.
Right. So Mark actually went out of his way to build the perfect structural environment for innovation.
He was incredibly strategic about it, too. He didn't just, throw a bunch of developers in a room and say, go innovate.
Like a lot of companies do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He set up these completely autonomous divisions within the larger company. He actually fought the corporate bureaucracy to give these new teams their own separate profit and loss statements.
Which, if you've ever worked in a big corporation, you know having separate P&Ls is a huge deal.
It's massive.
Because if your new struggling project is on the same P&L as the company's cash cow, the executives are going to kill your project the second they need to boost quarterly margins.
They'll cannibalize it instantly.
Right. So Mark isolates them.
He essentially acts as a human shield.
A human shield, yeah.
He protects his innovation teams from the meddling of middle management, the rigid HR policies, the standard corporate red tape.
He basically carved out this safe little island.
Exactly. He
Yep.
carved out the budget, he built the isolated ecosystem, and he stocked it with highly talented people.
So on paper, he did everything right.
According to every traditional corporate metric for fostering innovation, yes, Mark did everything exactly right. He built a startup inside a giant corporation.
But then we get to the meeting he has with the author of our source material. Mark sits down with him, and despite having this perfect setup, Mark is just completely miserable.
He's incredibly frustrated.
Yeah, he looks at this amazing division he built, and he uses this analogy that really, really stuck with me. It says, it's as if we have all of the raw materials, the kindling, the wood, the paper, the flint, even some sparks, but where is the fire?
Where is the fire?
Yeah.
It's such a great quote because it perfectly captures the trap of what we can call the black box of
The
innovation.
black box, yeah. Unpack that for us.
So in large organizations, there is this pervasive, almost superstitious belief that if you just get the organizational structure right.
Like the ping pong tables and the beanbag.
Exactly. If you rent a cool co-working space, isolate the team, give them a massive budget, they think innovation will just spontaneously combust inside that black box.
They treat it like magic. Like you perform the ritual, you set up the room, and you just sit back and wait for the magic to happen.
And Mark realized the magic wasn't happening.
Right.
He had all the structural elements, but he figured out that structural setup is entirely different from having a day-to-day methodology.
It makes me think of, well, imagine someone trying to open a world-class restaurant.
Okay, I like this.
Mark basically went out and secured the funding to build a state-of-the-art, multi-million-dollar commercial kitchen.
The best of the best.
Right. He bought the absolute best French ovens, the shiny stainless steel countertops, the sharpest imported knives. He even went out and hired a dozen people to stand around in the kitchen wearing chef coats.
So he's got the perfect structure.
He has the perfect structure, but he forgot the one thing that actually makes the restaurant work. He has no recipe.
He has no recipe,
Yeah.
and he has no methodology for how those people in the kitchen are supposed to communicate and work together to actually cook a meal.
They're just standing around in a very expensive room, right? Waiting for a gourmet dinner to spontaneously materialize out of thin air.
That's the black box. The kitchen is the corporate structure. The recipe is the innovation process.
Oh, I see.
Mark has the kitchen, but he lacks a step-by-step, rigorous methodology to take those raw ingredients, the ideas, and systematically test, refine, and convert them into a successful product.
So he's just staring at a pile of kindling.
Staring at the kindling, waiting for a fire that's never going to start on its own.
I do want to pause here, though, because I'm listening to Mark's story, and I have to admit, I feel a little bit of skepticism creeping in.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, we are talking about redefining what an entrepreneur is, right? But Mark is a corporate general manager.
He is.
He makes a hefty salary. He
Mm.
probably has a fantastic 401k match, stock options, comprehensive health insurance.
The golden handcuffs.
Exactly. If his internet project completely fails, he's not going to lose his house. The company will probably just, reassign him to a different division.
That's true.
So, are we really comfortable slapping the title of entrepreneur on someone who has absolutely no personal financial risk? Doesn't that kind of water down the struggle of the people who are maxing out their personal credit cards in a garage?
It's a totally fair question, And it's actually the most common pushback to this entire philosophy.
Yeah.
But it forces us to clarify what we actually mean when we say entrepreneurship.
Okay, so how do we separate the two?
We have historically conflated two completely different things: the financial risk profile of the individual and the actual activity of creating something new.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying the risk to your bank account isn't what makes you an entrepreneur.
Exactly. Think about the day-to-day reality of Mark's job versus the kid in the garage.
Okay.
They both wake up in the morning and face the exact same fundamental problem. They both have to build a product that does not currently exist for a customer they don't fully understand in a market that is constantly shifting.
Right, the actual work on the ground.
Yes. They both have to figure out how to allocate limited resources.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's venture capital or maybe it's a corporate budget, but it's still limited.
They both have constraints.
And they both have to lead a team through periods of intense doubt. The cognitive activity of navigating the unknown is identical.
Okay, I see that. The environment is different, the safety net is obviously different, but the work itself, the actual puzzle they are trying to solve is the same.
And if we don't recognize that the work is the same, we end up abandoning people like Mark.
How so?
We tell them, you're a manager, just manage. But traditional management tools don't work when you're building something unprecedented.
Because there's no precedent to manage.
Right. And this creates a massive psychological toll on these people. We call them entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Internal entrepreneurs.
Entrepreneurs.
Imagine being Mark. You are a highly competent, historically successful executive. You are used to executing plans flawlessly.
You're the guy who gets things done.
And then the CEO gives you a massive budget and says, innovate. And everyone in the company is watching you.
And every single day, you go into the office knowing you have literally no idea what you're doing because no one has ever done it before.
The imposter syndrome is crushing.
I can't even imagine.
They feel like they are personally failing, when in reality, it's the management system that's failing them. They have the resources, but they don't have the map.
Which means we clearly need a new map. And I guess that starts with a new definition.
It has to.
If the Hollywood image of the founder is a myth, and if a corporate manager like Mark is actually an entrepreneur in disguise, what is a startup? We throw that word around constantly.
We really do. Every new company calls itself a startup.
Yeah. My cousin's landscaping business calls itself a startup, but how are we actually defining it here?
The definition we are pulling from the sources is incredibly precise, and it really serves as the foundation for this entire methodology.
Let's hear it.
The exact phrasing is this: a startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Wow. Okay, let me repeat that so it sinks in. A startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. That's dense.
It is.
There's a lot to pull apart there.
We should definitely break it down piece by piece, but let's actually start with what that definition conspicuously leaves out. Notice what isn't in that sentence.
Well, looking at it, right off the bat, there's no mention of company size.
No mention of size at all.
None.
And no mention of the industry. It doesn't specify if the entity is a venture-backed tech firm in Silicon Valley, a nonprofit organization in a developing country, a small division within a Fortune 500 company, or even a branch of a government agency.
It completely democratizes the concept.
It does.
It really doesn't matter whose logo is on your paycheck. But, you know, the first phrase in that definition kind of trips me up.
Which one?
A human institution.
Right.
Because when I think of a startup, I think of agility, speed, breaking things, chaos. The word institution sounds like the exact opposite of that.
It sounds a bit stodgy.
It sounds heavy. It sounds like the Department of Motor Vehicles. Bureaucracy, lethargy, long lines. Why use such a heavy, boring word?
It's a deliberate choice. It's meant to counteract the romance we attach to startups.
Oh, interesting.
We get so caught up in the mythology of the visionary founder or the disruptive technology itself that we forget the granular reality of the work. Startups are, at their core, human enterprises.
Meaning you can't just have a great piece of code, you have to have people.
Exactly. You have
Okay.
to build an organization from scratch. You have to figure out how to hire the right people when you have absolutely zero brand recognition.
Nobody knows who you are.
Right. And you have to coordinate the creative energies of people who might have very different visions. You have to establish a culture, create HR policies, figure out how to do payroll.
All the unsexy stuff.
All of it.
Sure.
And you have to build communication structures that actually deliver results. You are building an institution. The product is just the output of the machine. The startup is the machine itself.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Like, you can invent the most brilliant algorithm in the world, but if you don't have an institution built around it, People to market it, sell it, fix the bugs, handle customer support.
The algorithm is completely useless.
Right. It just sits on a hard drive.
And that leads perfectly into the next part of the definition. To create a new product or service,
Okay.
we need to radically broaden our perspective on what a product actually is.
Because usually we just assume product means a physical gadget, like a new smartphone, or a piece of software like a new social media app.
Yeah, that's the default.
Yeah.
But in this framework, a product is simply any source of value for a customer.
Any source of value, so it's much broader.
Exactly. Yes, an innovation could be a groundbreaking scientific discovery. But it could also be repurposing an old technology for a completely new use case.
Okay, I can see that.
It could be inventing a new business model that unlocks hidden value. Look at a company like Airbnb.
That's a great example.
Right. They didn't invent the house. They didn't invent the internet. And they certainly didn't invent the concept of renting a room.
People have been doing that for centuries.
Exactly. They just invented a new institutional framework and business model to connect people. That was their product.
Wow. Okay.
Or an innovation could simply be taking an existing boring service and bringing it to a previously underserved demographic.
So human institution, new product or service. But the real kicker, the absolute crux of this entire philosophy is the last few words. Under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
That is the defining characteristic.
Yeah.
That is the only thing that separates a true startup from a standard business venture.
I think we need to ground extreme uncertainty in reality because every business has some uncertainty, right?
Nothing is guaranteed.
So let's do a comparison. I'm going to pitch you two different business ventures, and you tell me how the uncertainty differs.
I like this. Let's hear them.
Okay. Venture A. I have noticed that my neighborhood is booming, a lot of families are moving in, and I want to open up a franchise of a very popular, well-known grocery store chain right in the center of town.
Okay. A grocery franchise. Solid.
And Venture B. I am going to launch a completely new software platform that connects freelance gig economy workers specifically with people who own exotic pets like iguanas and snakes who need pet sitting.
An Uber for iguanas.
Yes, the Uber for iguanas.
This is the perfect contrast. Let's look at Venture A, the grocery store. If you want to open that franchise, what is your very first step?
Well, I'd write a business plan, figure out the costs, and go to a traditional bank to ask for a small business loan.
And the bank will probably give it to you.
Great.
Why? Because the level of uncertainty is incredibly low. The bank can accurately model your risk and your success rate.
Because it's been done 10,000 times before.
Exactly. The bank has historical data. They know exactly how many people live in that specific zip code. They know the average household income.
They probably know what I'm going to eat for breakfast.
Pretty much. They know exactly how much the average family spends on milk, bread, and eggs every week. They know the profit margins on those items. They know the exact supply chain costs. They even know the historical failure rate of that specific grocery store franchise.
So there's definitely risk involved, like a competitor could open across the street or the economy could tank, but it's a known risk. We understand the parameters of the game we're playing.
The execution might be hard, but the plan is solid. You know the variables.
Right.
Now, let's look at Venture B, your Uber for iguanas. Try taking that business plan to a traditional bank.
Oh, man. They would laugh me out of the building.
They absolutely would.
Yeah.
Because you are operating under extreme uncertainty. You don't have any historical data.
Right.
You don't actually know who your customer is. You don't know if iguana owners even want strangers coming into their house.
That's true. Maybe they're very protective.
You don't know how much they're willing to pay for the service. You don't know what features the app needs to have. Are there legal liabilities with exotic pets?
Probably. What if a snake gets out?
Exactly. And are there enough freelance pet sitters who are comfortable handling snakes?
It's just a giant void of unknowns.
In the grocery store scenario, you are navigating with a highly detailed satellite-guided GPS map. In the iguana app scenario, you have been dropped into the middle of a dense jungle at midnight, and you don't even have a compass.
I love that analogy, GPS versus the jungle.
And this is where companies fail. Traditional planning, traditional forecasting, traditional ROI calculations, they all completely fail in the jungle because you are trying to project data that doesn't exist yet.
This is a huge shift in perspective. It means we have to stop defining our work by our job titles or by whether our company has incorporated as an LLC or a C Corp.
Right.
We have to look at the project on our desk and ask, am I operating with a GPS map or am I in the jungle?
That is the exact question you should be asking.
And if you are in a space where the answers are fundamentally unknown, where the historical data doesn't help you, you are in a startup.
You are.
You are an entrepreneur, even if your employee badge says middle manager.
And if you don't realize you're in the jungle, you will try to use the GPS map and you will walk right off a cliff.
Which perfectly sets up this incredible story from the material about Scott Cook and Intuit.
Ah, yes. The Intuit story.
Because this story is the ultimate case study of a company that tried to use a GPS map in the jungle and almost completely lost their way.
It's a fascinating evolution to watch. Let's actually wind the clock back to 1982.
Okay, setting the scene.
Scott Cook is a true visionary founder. He looks at the very early personal computer market. And remember, we're talking the era of the Apple II and early IBMs.
Giant, clunky, beige boxes.
Exactly. And he has this radical idea. He believes that someday average consumers are going to use personal computers to balance their checkbooks and pay their bills.
In 1982, that is basically science fiction.
Completely.
People were using computers for basic word processing or playing Pong, not managing their personal finances.
It was a massive leap into extreme uncertainty.
Ah.
But Cook takes the plunge, he founds Intuit, and he creates Quicken.
And as we know, Quicken becomes a massive culture-shifting success.
It defines an entire category of software. Cook is the quintessential, wildly successful entrepreneur.
He nailed it. But then we fast forward 20 years.
Right, to 2002.
It's 2002. Intuit is no longer a scrappy startup. It's a massive, publicly traded corporation with thousands of employees and billions in revenue.
They've made it.
But Scott Cook is still deeply involved, and he is incredibly frustrated. He feels like the company has lost its edge. So being a data-driven guy, he really sits down and tabulates 10 years worth of data on Intuit's new product introductions.
He looks at every single new initiative they've launched over a decade, and the results are absolutely dismal.
Just a terrible return on investment.
Shockingly bad. And this leads to a profound realization. Cook looks at his company. Intuit is widely considered an extremely well-managed company, right?
Yeah, they were a darling of Wall Street.
They hire top MBA graduates. They use industry best practices for management, budgeting, and forecasting. But he realizes that the prevailing management paradigm, the very system that made Intuit a stable, profitable corporate giant, is completely inadequate for generating continuous breakthrough innovation.
The system that manages the core business is actively killing the no business.
Yes.
Cook diagnosed the root cause of this, and it all came down to how the company handled testing, decision-making, and internal culture. He observed this dynamic that he called the politicians versus the entrepreneurs.
This is such a critical concept.
And when I read this, it hit so close to home for anyone who has ever worked in a big office.
It's a dynamic that emerges naturally in almost every large organization. Cook noticed that in a traditional corporate environment, the way you build a new product goes like this. A team comes up with an idea. They spend months, maybe even years, building it in secret.
Behind closed doors.
Right. They allocate massive budgets. And then they have one big test, one massive product launch where it finally meets the customer.
Like a movie premiere.
Exactly like that.
And if you only have one big test, the internal dynamics of the company become incredibly toxic. Because if there's only budget for 1 or 2 big launches a year, human nature takes over.
People get competitive.
The employees are forced to stop acting like creators, and they have to start acting like politicians and salespeople.
Think about what you actually have to do to get your idea funded in that environment.
Model, it's a nightmare.
You have an idea for a new feature. You can't just build it and see if it works. You have to lobby for resources.
Right.
You have to build a slick 50-page PowerPoint presentation. You have to massage the data to make the projections look like a guaranteed billion-dollar market.
Because if it's not $1 billion, they won't fund it.
Exactly. You have to schmooze the vice president of product. You have to convince senior management that out of 100 possible ideas, yours is the singular, guaranteed winner.
It literally becomes an election.
It does.
The corporate environment turns into a high-stakes, winner-take-all political campaign. It has nothing to do with whether the product is actually good for the customer. It entirely relies on PR, debate skills, internal optics, and your charisma as a presenter.
And that's the tragedy of it. The best idea doesn't win, the best politician wins.
Wow, that is so true.
It's a highly subjective system based on persuasion, not reality. And Cook realizes this is destroying Intuit's ability to innovate. because the best innovators aren't always the slickest presenters.
Often they're the worst presenters.
Right, so he proposes a radical alternative. He says, instead of having a system that forces one big test and turns our employees into politicians, we need to build a system that runs 500 tests.
Okay, I have to be honest. I hear 500 tests and my immediate reaction is just exhaustion.
It sounds like a lot.
It sounds like a nightmare. Instead of making one great product, we have to run 500 tests. How does a company even survive that? It sounds like absolute chaos, just a massive drain on time and money, with everyone running in different directions.
I get that reaction. It sounds chaotic if you are still thinking about a test as a massive multi-million-dollar product launch.
Right.
The shift requires completely redefining what a test actually is. Let's move away from the political election analogy. If the one big test model is a political campaign, the 500 test model is a world-class science lab.
A science lab. Okay, walk me through that.
So in a chemistry lab, scientists don't sit around a boardroom table arguing passionately for months about what they think two chemicals will do when mixed together.
Right, they don't vote on the chemical reaction.
They don't make PowerPoint decks about it. They just go to the bench, mix a tiny amount of the chemicals in a test tube, and observe the reaction.
It's empirical.
It takes 5 minutes, it costs pennies,
Yeah.
and the result is objective reality.
Ah. So you're saying the tests have to be microscopic?
They have to be incredibly cheap and incredibly fast. In software, this might mean instead of building a whole new feature, you just put a fake button on your website that says new feature, and you track how many people click it.
Oh, wow.
If nobody clicks the button, you don't build the feature. That's a test. It took one developer 10 minutes to write the code.
That is brilliant. So if you can run 500 rapid, inexpensive, microscopic tests, the entire culture of the company changes.
Exactly. You don't need to lobby the VP anymore.
You don't need to be a politician.
If you have an idea, you just design a cheap test. Everyone's ideas can be tested.
And as Cook pointed out, the data speaks for itself. The debate just ends.
The data wins every time. When you implement a system like this, you stop creating a society of politicians who spin the truth. And you start creating a society of true entrepreneurs.
People who have an idea run a rapid test, look at the real-world data, learn from it, and immediately run a better test.
It's literally the scientific method applied to business.
But, I mean, the cultural shift required to actually implement this in a massive corporation, it has to be brutal.
It's incredibly difficult.
Because Intuit was a company that prided itself on excellence. Big companies survive by getting it right the first time. Six Sigma, quality control, zero defects.
That's the traditional mindset.
How hard is it to convince a culture obsessed with perfection to suddenly embrace a culture of 500 messy, rapid tests where the vast majority of them are going to fail?
It is arguably the hardest challenge in modern management. It requires a complete rewiring of the corporate ego and the incentive structure. Think about how performance is measured in a traditional company.
Mostly by avoiding mistakes, honestly.
Right. Failure is punished. If you champion a product launch and it fails, that is a massive stain on your career. You might not get promoted. You might get fired.
Right, so everyone plays it safe.
Exactly. But in the 500 test model, the definition of failure has to fundamentally change. A test that proves a bad idea is a bad idea is actually a successful experiment.
Because you learned something.
Because it generated validated learning quickly and cheaply, saving the company millions of dollars in the long run. Management has to stop rewarding people for great PowerPoint presentations and start rewarding people for designing elegant, insightful experiments, even if the hypothesis is proven wrong.
This forces everyone listening right now to hold up a mirror to their own organization, or even just their own small team.
It's a tough mirror to look into.
It is. Look at your daily operations. Look at your meetings. Are you forcing your people to act like politicians? Do they have to constantly lobby, massage your ego, and build decks just to get permission to try something small?
Are they scared to be wrong?
Right. Or are you actively giving them the tools, the budget, and the psychological safety to act like scientists running rapid tests?
And that leads us to the final and perhaps most uncomfortable hurdle in this entire transformation.
What's that?
Well, we've talked about how the employees need to change. But what about the leadership? If the team is acting like scientists, running their own tests and letting the data dictate the product, what exactly is the boss supposed to be doing?
Right. This brings us to the concept of retiring the Caesar manager.
The Caesar manager. It's a visceral image, and according to Scott Cook, dismantling this style of leadership is the fundamental responsibility of senior management if they want their companies to survive. Leaders must absolutely stop playing Caesar.
We all know a Caesar manager. We've all probably worked for one.
Unfortunately, yes.
Picture the Roman emperor sitting high up in the Colosseum viewing box. The product teams, the gladiators come out into the arena.
I love this analogy.
They present their shiny new feature, they do their pitch, and the Caesar manager just sits there, strokes their chin, relies on their gut instinct, and gives a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
It's a completely toxic dynamic for a startup environment. But we have to understand why leaders default to this behavior.
It's not just because they're on a power trip.
No, it's not necessarily because they are bad people. It's because traditional management has trained them this way. We teach leaders that their value lies in being the primary decision maker.
They are supposed to have the grand vision.
They're supposed to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
They get promoted precisely because their intuition has been right in the past.
Yes. Like, if you are managing a grocery store, your intuition is incredibly valuable. You've been in the grocery business for 20 years. You know that putting the milk in the back of the store forces people to walk past the cookies.
Exactly.
Your gut instinct is tuned to a low uncertainty environment.
But if we loop back to our definition of a startup operating under extreme uncertainty, the boss's intuition becomes entirely useless.
Because it's based on the past.
Right. If you are building an Uber for iguanas, the CEO's guess about what the customer wants is literally just as likely to be wrong as the newest intern's guess. There is no historical data to inform the intuition.
So in the face of extreme uncertainty, relying on a single executive's gut feeling isn't just inefficient, it's incredibly reckless.
Which means the leader's job description has to shift completely.
Yeah.
They can no longer be the chief decider of product features.
They have to step back.
They have to step way back from the product itself. Their new job is to put the culture, the systems, and the infrastructure in place so that the teams can move at the speed of the experimentation system.
You know, I can imagine a lot of managers hearing this and feeling deeply threatened.
Oh, it's terrifying for them.
If I'm not making the final call on the product design, if I'm not the visionary approving the features, what am I even doing? Have I just been demoted to a glorified administrator?
It can feel that way.
I think there's a powerful analogy here about how we view the act of creation. It's the difference between being a sculptor and being a gardener.
Oh, walk us through the difference.
So the traditional Caesar manager views themselves as a sculptor. They have a giant block of raw marble in front of them, and they are the only one holding the chisel.
They're doing all the carving.
Right. They chip away at it, giving exact top-down orders. Move this button to the left, change this color to blue, target this specific demographic. They are trying to forcefully carve the exact product they see in their head out of the stone.
It's entirely ego-driven.
It really is. But the new entrepreneurial manager, the leader of a modern startup environment, cannot be a sculptor. They need to be a gardener.
The gardener.
Think about how a gardener works. A gardener doesn't actually make a plant grow. You can't yell at a seed to grow faster.
No matter how hard you try.
Right. You can't pull on the stem of a tomato plant to make it taller. You'll just break it.
So what does the gardener actually control?
The gardener only controls the ecosystem. They make sure the soil has the right nutrients, which in business terms is budget and resources.
Okay, so I see.
They provide the right amount of water and sunlight, which is encouragement and strategic direction. And most importantly, they pull the weeds, they remove the bureaucratic red tape and the corporate politics that choke out new ideas.
They're curating the environment.
Exactly. The gardener creates the perfect environment, the perfect systems, where the best seeds, the best ideas from the team can grow organically on their own, guided by the data of the tests.
That is a phenomenal way to frame the transition. The boss is the architect of the ecosystem, not the dictator of the product.
Yes.
And we actually have a powerful real-world example from the sources of this exact shift happening at scale.
Oh, at Intuit.
At Intuit.
Yeah.
After Scott Cook realized all of this about the 500 tests and the danger of the Caesar manager, he and his team set about changing Intuit.
And how did that go?
Well, a few years later, the CEO of Intuit at the time, Brad Smith, did something incredible. He stood up in front of all 7,000 Intuit employees.
7,000 corporate employees.
Yes. And he didn't just give a standard rah-rah motivational speech. He fundamentally redefined the entire identity of the corporation.
What did he say?
He looked at those 7,000 people and declared that Intuit matched all three parts of the definition of a startup.
Wow. Can you imagine being in that auditorium?
It must have been wild.
You work for a massive legacy financial software company. You probably think of yourself as a cog in a machine. And the CEO looks at you and says, "We are a startup. We are a human institution, we are creating new products, and we are operating under extreme uncertainty.
He was basically giving 7,000 people permission to stop being bureaucrats and start being entrepreneurs.
That's huge.
It is a profound mandate,
Yeah.
and it requires immense humility from leadership. It leads directly to the core shift for anyone managing a team today. Your job is not to have the best ideas.
You have to let go of that ego.
You have to let it go. Your job is to build the innovation factory. You build the system, you foster the culture, you guarantee the psychological safety that allows your team to test their ideas rapidly, cheaply, and safely.
So you are no longer building the product.
Right. You are no longer building the product, you are building the machine that tests the product.
Man, this has been an incredible paradigm shift.
Mm.
We have systematically taken the mythological hoodie-wearing garage founder, and we've replaced them with a rigorous, accessible framework that anyone can use.
It's a much more empowering way to look at it.
It really is. So let's tie all of this together. If you had to distill this entire exploration from Mark the corporate manager to the Uber for iguanas to Scott Cook's 500 tests into one core, unforgettable insight, what is the soul of this concept?
The central insight is this. Entrepreneurship is not a personality type. It is not a genetic trait that some people are born with, and it is certainly not a Hollywood montage of hackers in a garage.
Right.
Entrepreneurship is a very specific type of management. It is a management discipline designed explicitly for navigating the unknown.
A management discipline.
Whether you are Mark struggling in a corporate boardroom or a college kid coding in a dorm, if you are building an institution to create something new under extreme uncertainty, you are an entrepreneur. And you cannot survive on passion and vision alone. You need a rigorous scientific process to navigate the dark.
Entrepreneurship is management. That changes everything. But, it leaves us with a massive cliffhanger.
Oh, it definitely does.
If we are all meant to be entrepreneurs, if our job is to act like scientists and run hundreds of tests instead of playing corporate politics, how do we actually prove that our tests are working?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. If we are in the jungle without a map, how do we know if a test was successful or if we're just spinning our wheels, wasting money, and using learning as an excuse for a failed product?
The very fine line.
It is. And that is exactly what we are going to uncover in our next deep dive into the concept of validated learning. Until then, take a hard look at your own projects, your own team, and ask yourself, are you acting like a politician or an entrepreneur?
Why is it that whenever a massive multi-million-dollar project completely craters, the ultimate excuse in the boardroom is always, well, at least we learned a lot?
Right, yeah. The classic get-out-of-jail-free card.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the last time you sat in one of those post-mortem meetings. The budget is totally gone, the timeline is blown, market share hasn't moved an inch, and someone at the head of the table takes a deep breath, puts on a brave face, and says, look, it didn't hit our revenue targets, but the learnings here are incredible.
It's painful to even hear you say it. It feels like such a consolation prize for poor execution.
It really does. But, what if learning wasn't just a consolation prize for catastrophic failure? What if learning was actually the core product you were supposed to be building all along?
Well, in this deep dive, you are about to explore exactly that. We're going to see how to transform abstract, risky business ideas into rigorous scientific experiments.
Which is so needed, because the traditional way is broken, right?
Yeah. Oh, completely. We are going to unpack why traditional business metrics like ROI forecasts and those massive multi-year strategic plans are fundamentally flawed when you operate in environments of extreme uncertainty.
Yeah, they just don't work.
They don't. And more importantly, we're going to look at how a concept called validated learning can save you from the ultimate entrepreneurial tragedy.
Which is what exactly?
Successfully and flawlessly executing a plan that leads your company straight off a cliff.
Wow. Yeah, that really is the worst case scenario.
It happens all the time, but whether you are building a startup in your garage or managing a division in a Fortune 500 boardroom, mastering this shift from blind execution to scientific discovery is the only reliable way to build a sustainable business.
I mean, it is just so easy to fall into that trap of the post-mortem rationalization. You spend 2 years building something, it launches to absolute crickets, and suddenly everyone is a philosopher.
Right. Suddenly everyone is very wise in hindsight.
Exactly. They say things like, oh, we discovered that the market isn't ready for our genius. Or, well, we learned that our marketing channels were misaligned.
Yeah, but you can't take a good story to the bank.
No, you can't. You can't use an after-the-fact rationalization to meet payroll. And yet, I feel like This is the default operating system for so many intelligent professionals.
It really is. And the underlying psychology of that behavior is deeply rooted in how we're trained to view professional competence.
How do you mean?
Well, as humans, and especially as managers whose livelihoods and reputations are tied to performance reviews, we use the word learning as a shield.
Like a defense mechanism.
Exactly. It's a defense mechanism against admitting a failure of execution. Because in traditional management, failure to deliver what you promised when you promised it is a career-ending move.
Right, you get fired for that.
So when a product tanks, the team scrambles to craft a narrative of discovery. They sift through the wreckage of the project to find some tiny nugget of insight to present to their investors or their bosses.
Just to save face.
Yeah. But true learning in a highly uncertain environment isn't a bedtime story you invent after the ship has sunk. It has to be cold, hard, empirical data proving that you've discovered valuable truths about your business model, and you have to gather it proactively.
That distinction is so critical. We are talking about a very specific demanding standard here, which the source material calls validated learning.
Yes, validated learning. It's a key term.
And just to clarify that term for you listening, because, it does sound a bit like corporate jargon, validated learning is not a comfort blanket.
Not all.
It is a systemic, rigorous method for demonstrating empirical progress. It's proving, with actual behavioral data, that your team is figuring out what customers actually want, rather than what you just assumed they wanted while sitting in a conference room.
To really ground this, let's look at a situation that happens constantly in the tech world. Consider the early days of the avatar-based social network, IMVU.
Oh, this is such a great example.
It really is. So the founders of this company were not naive kids fresh out of college. They were veterans. They had lived through the brutal dot-com bust of the early 2000s.
Right, they had seen some stuff.
Yeah, they had seen companies burn through hundreds of millions of dollars on, pets.com style hubris. They were carrying the psychological scars of those failures.
They were probably terrified of making the same mistakes.
Absolutely terrified. They were determined not to repeat them. They wanted to be serious, analytical, and highly strategic.
They were trying to outsmart the uncertainty, basically. I mean, their vision was to build a 3D avatar product, essentially a virtual world where you could chat with people.
Right.
But they had this grand strategic theory, because the landscape at the time was dominated by massive instant messaging networks. You had AOL Instant Messenger, Yahoo Messenger, MSN.
The giants of the era.
Exactly. So the IMVU founders hypothesized that consumers were suffering from network fatigue. They assumed that nobody in their right mind would go through the friction of downloading a brand new standalone chat client and then try to convince all their friends to switch over to it.
And honestly, it sounds like a perfectly logical, rational assumption to make in a boardroom. I mean, why fight AOL when you can just piggyback on them?
Right. It makes total sense on paper. So they bet the farm on interoperability. They decided their 3D avatars needed to plug directly into the existing networks.
Which is not an easy thing to do.
No. If you know anything about software engineering, especially back then, integrating with a dozen different proprietary protocols is an absolute nightmare.
Oh, it requires months and months of grueling, complex back-end architecture.
Yeah, so the team locked themselves in a room. They coded feverishly. They built this massive, incredibly sophisticated bridge to AOL, Yahoo, and MSN. They thought they were executing a brilliant strategic masterstroke.
And then they launched it.
And they finally launched it to the public. And it just flatlined.
Totally flatlined.
Nobody downloaded it. The few who did abandoned it almost immediately.
Now, this is the critical juncture where most companies diverge into failure or survival.
What usually happens in a traditional setting?
Well, after a launch like that, traditional executives might have blamed the marketing team, like, oh, we just didn't push it hard enough.
Right, they just need more ads.
Exactly. They might authorize a massive advertising spend to force the product onto the market, or they might just shut the whole division down and declare that the 3D avatar trend was dead.
But the IMVU team didn't do that.
No, because they were focused on understanding the actual mechanics of their failure. They didn't just guess. They physically brought potential customers, mostly teenagers and young adults, into their office.
Just to watch them use it.
Yeah, they sat them down in front of a computer, told them to use the product, and just watched.
Oh, man. I can only imagine the sheer anxiety of sitting behind a two-way mirror, watching a teenager completely ignore the brilliant interoperability feature you just spent 6 months of your life coding.
I'm sure it was a profoundly humbling experience, but what they discovered completely shattered their foundational assumption.
What did they find out?
The customers revealed, and not through answering hypothetical survey questions, but through their raw, unvarnished reactions to the software, that the entire strategy was backwards.
Wait, backwards how?
The founders assumed people wanted to use these new avatars with their existing friends on AOL. But teenagers didn't want to invite their real-life friends to a weird 3D avatar chat.
Because their real-life friends would judge them.
Exactly. They viewed these avatars as a tool to explore new identities and make new friends online, safely and anonymously.
So they actively desired a standalone network.
Yes.
The very thing the founders thought was a huge barrier to entry was actually the core value proposition.
It's crazy, isn't it? All of that time, all of those agonizing months of complex engineering to integrate with a dozen different chat networks was completely irrelevant. It offered absolutely zero value to the end user.
Let me throw an analogy at this because I think the traditional way we measure progress is just completely broken here.
Go for it.
If I spend 6 months in my garage building a massive, intricate wooden boat, and I finally drag it down to the harbor, push it into the water, and it instantly sinks to the bottom.
A total disaster.
Right. And I stand on the dock and tell my investors, well, at least I learned that this specific type of wood is too heavy. I mean, that is a catastrophic waste. That's the post-mortem excuse.
Yep, that's the classic get-out-of-jail-free card we talked about.
But if before I built anything, I took a tiny folded paper boat with a little GPS tracker on it, and I tossed it into the harbor just to measure the speed of the current and see if the water was flowing out to sea or smashing against the rocks, that is validated learning.
That's a great way to look at it. You are empirically testing the environment before you commit massive resources.
Exactly. So the million-dollar question for you is, why is corporate culture so obsessed with building the giant sinkable boat first?
Well, we build the giant boat because the legacy of 20th century management has trained us to value execution over discovery.
Execution over discovery. Right.
We are taught that professional success means delivering a massive comprehensive plan on time and on budget. And, if you are building a suspension bridge or manufacturing a standard sedan, that execution first mindset is perfect.
But you know what you're doing.
Exactly. The environment is stable, the physics are known, the customer demand is established.
But startups aren't like that.
Not at all. In an environment of extreme uncertainty like launching a disruptive tech product or entering a totally new geographic market, you don't even know if people want to cross the river, let alone pay a toll for a bridge.
Yeah, that makes sense. But the pushback I hear all the time from traditional managers is that building paper boats makes a company look amateurish.
I hear that a lot too.
I mean, if you are a premium brand, you can't just throw a half-baked minimal product out into the market to test the waters. You risk catastrophic brand damage.
Yeah.
Like, if Apple releases a glitchy half-finished phone just to learn something, their stock plummets.
Right. That is a very common defense of the execution-first model, but it really misinterprets what a minimal test actually is.
Oh.
A minimal experiment doesn't mean releasing a defective product to your entire global customer base. It means finding the smallest, most contained way to test the underlying assumption.
So it's not a public beta test necessarily.
No, not always. For a premium hardware company, the paper boat isn't a broken phone on Best Buy shelves. It might be an unbranded, high-fidelity prototype given to 50 people under strict NDAs just to see if they actually use a specific hardware feature in their daily routines.
Oh, I see. It's about testing the hypothesis quietly.
Exactly. Validated learning forces you to admit that your grand strategic plan, no matter how beautifully formatted the PowerPoint is actually just a precarious stack of untested assumptions.
And admitting you don't know the answers is a massive blow to the ego, especially for senior leadership. You are literally paid to have the answers.
It requires a profound vulnerability, for sure. But once you cross that threshold, it completely redefines productivity.
How does productivity change?
Well, productivity is no longer measured by how many lines of code an engineer writes, or how many features the marketing team launches, or how thick the strategic planning binder is.
Because none of that might actually matter to the customer.
Exactly. Productivity becomes a measure of how much validated learning you acquire per hour of effort. It's about asking, are you learning what the customer actually wants faster than you are burning through your capital.
So take a moment and audit your own workday right now as you listen to this. Look at the major project you are pushing forward.
It's a sobering exercise.
It really is. Ask yourself, are you operating on a comprehensive strategic plan based on assumptions made in a vacuum? Or are you actively building systems to empirically track what your customers actually do when they interact with your ideas?
Because if you're just following the blueprint without testing the physics of the water, you are currently building a sinkable boat.
And this realization that learning is the only true unit of progress when you are enveloped in uncertainty, it forces a massive paradigm shift. It completely revolutionizes how we define value in a business context.
Which fundamentally changes our understanding of waste, too.
Right. And I want to dig into the origins of this because it doesn't come from Silicon Valley software culture, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It actually comes from Japanese automotive manufacturing. The foundations of this framework draw heavily from lean manufacturing principles, specifically the Toyota production system developed by Taiichi Ohno.
A brilliant system.
Yeah, so in a traditional 20th century factory, the definition of value is incredibly straightforward. Value is any activity that provides a direct, tangible benefit to the end customer.
Like assembling the engine.
Right, assembling the engine. That is value. Installing the steering wheel. Value. Moving boxes of inventory around a warehouse because your supply chain is inefficient. That is waste.
Pure waste.
And lean manufacturing took over the industrial world by training every single worker on the floor to ruthlessly identify that waste and systematically eliminate it.
But the transition from the factory floor to the modern knowledge economy, it introduces a massive complication.
What's the catch?
Well, in a Toyota plant, you know exactly who the customer is, and you know exactly what they find valuable, which is a reliable working car. The target is stationary.
Yeah, they aren't going to suddenly decide they want a boat instead.
Exactly. But in a startup or an innovation lab within a large corporation, you don't know who the early adopters are going to be, and you certainly don't know what specific features they will find valuable. The target is invisible, and it's constantly moving.
So the definition of value has to evolve to match the environment.
Precisely. In an uncertain environment, value is not building things. Value is learning what creates value for the customer.
Wow, okay. That is a huge shift.
It is. That is the only activity that matters. Therefore, by definition, any effort, any meeting, any line of code that does not directly contribute to learning what the customer wants is an absolute waste of time and money.
So if we apply that harsh, unforgiving light to the IMBU story we just dissected,
Sure.
They spent months building interoperability for over a dozen instant messaging clients.
Yep.
They thought they were generating immense value because they were writing complex code and solving hard technical problems. And, engineers love solving hard technical problems.
Well, they love it. It feels so productive.
But if value is strictly defined as learning what the customer wants, then almost all of that massive engineering effort was total waste.
Let's audit their waste, actually. Could the IMVU team have learned the exact same lesson? That teenagers wanted a standalone network and didn't care about AOL integration with half as much effort.
Absolutely.
Could they have learned it by integrating with just 3 networks instead of 12?
Yes, for sure.
Could they have learned it by integrating with just one single network?
Yes. The learning outcome would have been identical.
Exactly. The customer still would have rejected the AOL integration, and the team would have realized they needed a standalone product. Therefore, the thousands of hours spent building the integrations for the other 11 networks provided zero value.
It's actually worse than zero value, right? Because it delayed the learning.
Yes, it didn't accelerate their learning. The complexity actually delayed their ability to put the product in front of a teenager.
There is a psychological trap here that we really have to talk about. Why do intelligent, experienced teams willingly engage in that kind of waste?
It's a great question.
I mean, why do we hide in the proverbial basement, coding, designing, or drafting business plans for months on end without talking to a single user?
Well, there is a phenomenon described in the entrepreneurial space that captures this perfectly. It's called the audacity of zero.
The audacity of zero. What is that?
It is one of the most dangerous cognitive biases in business. When you have 0 customers, 0 revenue, and 0 market feedback, your imagination is entirely unconstrained by reality.
Because there's no data to prove you wrong.
Right. You can open up a beautifully formatted Excel spreadsheet, Tweak a single conversion rate cell from 2% to 5%, and suddenly your 5-year projection shows $100 million in recurring revenue.
And it feels amazing.
It feels great. And as long as you haven't launched the product, nobody in the world can prove that spreadsheet wrong. It is a perfect, flawless reality.
So having 0 customers is actually an incredibly warm, psychologically safe place to exist.
Exactly. It allows the founders, the product managers, and even the investors to maintain a shared illusion of inevitable massive success. You can convince yourself that you are the next Steve Jobs, right on the cusp of denting the universe.
But the moment you launch a minimal product, the moment you put that tiny paper boat in water, and you get 10 actual customers, and 8 of them aggressively hate what you built, the illusion violently shatters.
Yes, it does. The comfortable audacity of 0 is instantly replaced by the harsh, humiliating reality of single-digit traction.
And people will do almost anything to protect that illusion and delay that humiliation, which leads directly to a toxic corporate behavior known as success theater.
Oh, success theater. It's everywhere.
You see this constantly in both startups and massive conglomerates. A company launches a new initiative. The underlying metrics are fundamentally broken. Customer acquisition costs are astronomical, churn is through the roof, nobody is returning to the app.
The core engine of the business is just stalling.
Right, it's failing. So what does leadership do? They buy a $3 million Super Bowl ad.
Or they hire a flashy PR firm to secure a glowing profile in a major business magazine.
Yeah, they pivot to focusing entirely on vanity metrics.
Right, they might artificially juice their top-line revenue numbers by offering massive, unsustainable discounts that completely destroy their profit margins, just so they can show a graph with an upward trend line at the next board meeting.
It's all fake. They are engaging in pure theatrics to mask the lack of fundamental, validated learning. They are putting a fresh coat of paint on a house that has absolutely no foundation.
And success theater is not just deceptive, it is actively destructive.
Because it burns cash.
Yes, it consumes the exact resources, the remaining runway of cash, the time of the engineering team, and the passion of the founders that the company desperately needs to survive.
You're starving the real work to feed the illusion.
Precisely. By pretending you have already achieved success, you cut off the oxygen to the experimental process required to actually figure out what the customer wants. The rule remains absolute. Productivity in a state of uncertainty is strictly about how much validated learning you acquire per unit of time. Everything else is theater.
Let's make this actionable for you listening. You need to relentlessly audit your current workflow. Open your calendar for the next 2 weeks. Look at your team's task list.
It's a great exercise.
How many features? How many internal debates about color schemes? How many hours of cross-functional alignment meetings are dedicated to polishing elements that the end user might never even discover, let alone care about?
Usually it's a lot.
Yeah. If an initiative does not directly generate empirical data about customer behavior, you need to ruthlessly eliminate it.
And that requires a total restructuring of ego. You have to stop deriving your professional self-worth from delivering a complex feature on a deadline and start deriving it from running a clean experiment that yields definitive learning.
Now, the counter-argument to this, and I hear this from teams who try to adopt these lean methodologies and fail miserably, is that it just creates chaos.
Ah, yes, the chaos argument.
Right, because if our goal is to maximize learning and minimize planning, the natural instinct is to just burn the business plan, throw spaghetti at the wall, and see what sticks.
Which is a terrible idea.
Exactly. But if you just run around trying random things, you're going to end up with a very messy wall, an exhausted team, and no actual insight. This brings us to a massively common pitfall, which is the just do it fallacy.
Yes, the pendulum swings way too far. When traditional managers realize that their rigid waterfall planning doesn't work in highly fluid environments, they often abandon structure entirely.
They just go rogue.
They adopt a mindset of complete anarchy. They assume that if bureaucratic management is the enemy of innovation, then operating without any plan or standard must be the solution. So they build a feature quickly, ship it immediately, and just sit back to watch the analytics dashboard.
It's the Nike slogan approach to product development. Just do it. Ship it and see what the market says.
But the fatal flaw in that logic is profound. If you launch a product simply to see what happens, you are guaranteed to succeed at one thing:
What's that?
You will definitely see what happens.
That's hilarious, but you won't necessarily learn a single useful thing about why it happened or how to replicate it, right?
Exactly, because you didn't establish a baseline. You didn't make a formal prediction.
You didn't do the science part.
Right. This is why we have to return to the rigors of the scientific method. In any legitimate science, an experiment is only valid if it is falsifiable.
Falsifiable, meaning it can be proven wrong.
Yes. If you cannot fail, you cannot learn. If you just ship a product without stating what you expect the metrics to do, any result can be rationalized away after the fact.
Oh, I see this all the time. If you only get 100 users in the first month, the marketing team will say, well, that's actually a highly targeted, elite niche test group. This is great.
Yep. Or if the servers crash because the code was sloppy, the engineering team will say, look at that. We have so much viral demand. We broke the internet.
It is a direct regression back to the post-mortem excuse-making we started with.
Exactly. To avoid the chaos of just do it, you have to treat your business like a laboratory. You do not start with a product, you start with a hypothesis.
You have to write it down.
You make a specific, measurable prediction, and then you build the minimum system required to test it empirically. Every single project, whether it's a new app or a new physical storefront, rests on a foundation of assumptions.
But there are two specific assumptions that are more critical than any others, right?
Yes, the leap of faith assumptions. If these two fail, the whole company dies.
Okay, let's break this down. The first one is the value hypothesis. This requires you to ask, does this product, service, or feature actually deliver real, tangible value to the customer once they interact with it? Like, are we actually solving a pain point, or are we just a novelty?
Exactly. And the second is the growth hypothesis. This asks, how will new customers discover this product? What is the specific mechanism of spread?
Like, will it spread through word of mouth, paid advertising, or network effects?
Right. And you have to test both. Let's get out of the software startup world for a second and look at how this applies to a massive legacy enterprise.
Because it's not just for startups.
Not at all. Consider the case of Caroline Barlerin at Hewlett-Packard. HP is a behemoth with hundreds of thousands of employees globally.
Massive scale.
Yeah, and Caroline had a grand, inspiring vision. She wanted to harness the collective power of those employees to create a massive force for social good, specifically by implementing a corporate volunteering policy where employees could donate their specialized skills to nonprofits.
That's a great idea. But in a standard corporate hierarchy, the playbook for launching an initiative like that is just set in stone.
Oh, totally. She would normally spend 12 to 18 months drafting a comprehensive strategic proposal. She would run it through endless layers of committee approvals to secure a multi-million-dollar budget.
IT would be tasked with building some massive, global, internal software platform just to track the hours.
Yep. HR would orchestrate a coordinated global PR launch with glossy brochures on every desk in 30 different countries, rolling it out to 300,000 people on a single Tuesday morning.
And if it failed, if employees just ignored the brochures and didn't actually volunteer, it would be a catastrophic waste of capital, and her internal political capital would be completely destroyed.
She would be done. But Caroline bypassed the traditional playbook. She understood that her grand vision rested on untested assumptions. So she treated the rollout as a contained experiment.
She didn't launch to 300,000 people?
No. She identified a tiny, isolated sample size of employees to test her two core hypotheses.
So, applying the framework, her value hypothesis was, if employees are given the explicit permission and a clear avenue to volunteer, will they actually find it valuable enough to sacrifice their time?
Right.
And her growth hypothesis was, once an employee has a positive volunteering experience, will they naturally evangelize the program and recruit their colleagues to join them?
Exactly. And she needed to measure baseline behavior, not intent.
What's the difference?
Well, if you send out a corporate survey asking, hey, do you support volunteering and social good? 99% of people will say yes because nobody wants to sound like a monster on an HR survey.
Right, that's just vanity data.
Exactly. She needed to know if they would actually log off their computers and go do the real work. By testing with a small group, she could track the exact percentage of people who opened the email versus the people who actually showed up at a charity.
And if the numbers were abysmal, she could tweak the messaging or change the incentives, basically tune the engine, without having burned millions of dollars on a global IT platform that nobody wanted to use.
It's brilliant. She applied the rigors of the scientific method to a corporate HR initiative. She proved that the lean framework is not restricted to teenagers building apps in a garage. It scales to any industry, any department, and any initiative that involves human behavior.
I want to pause on that for a second because navigating the corporate realities of this is incredibly difficult.
It's the hardest part.
Right, for a listener working inside a traditional corporation right now, failure to execute a mandated plan gets you fired. Yet here, we are advocating for actively designing experiments that have a high probability of failing simply to prove a hypothesis wrong.
Yeah, it sounds crazy to a traditional manager.
How on earth do you stand up in a board meeting and convince your vice president that your intentional localized failure is actually high-level productivity? How do you sell the idea that, hey, I built this tiny pilot program and it completely flopped and I deserve a bonus for it?
That is the single hardest cultural hurdle to clear. You
Yeah.
cannot just change the workflow. You have to completely change the vocabulary of the organization.
How do you do that?
You have to actively move the goalpost for your team from delivering a checklist of features to achieving validated learning. And the strategy for convincing a skeptical boss is to frame the entire experimental process entirely around risk mitigation.
Executives love mitigating risk.
They understand risk perfectly. You don't pitch it as a chance to learn, you pitch it as an insurance policy.
So you basically audit the risk for them. You go in and say, look, we have this grand vision for the new product line, but it relies on two massive leap of faith assumptions regarding customer adoption.
Yes, exactly that.
And you say, if we are wrong about these assumptions, we will lose $5 million and waste a year of our engineering team's capacity. I am proposing that we spend $10,000 in 2 weeks right now to scientifically prove whether these assumptions are based in reality before we authorize the full $5 million budget.
Boom. When you reframe the minimum viable product as a tool to protect the company's core capital from massive downstream waste, smart leaders immediately understand the value.
You are buying certainty at a massive discount.
That's exactly what it is.
So before you draft a press release, before you authorize a new hire, sit down and explicitly write out your value hypothesis and your growth hypothesis. What are the core assumptions that absolutely must be true for this project to survive?
And crucially, what specific measurable metrics would definitively prove those hypotheses wrong?
Because if you cannot define what failure looks like in advance, you are not running an experiment. You are just guessing and hoping.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of execution. We have defined our hypotheses. We know exactly what behavioral data we need to collect to validate or invalidate them.
Right, so how do we actually run this test out in the wild?
Historically, when a business wanted to test an idea before building it, they relied on traditional market research.
Like focus groups.
Yeah. You hire a firm, you recruit 20 people who fit your demographic profile, you put them in a conference room with a two-way mirror, you buy them sandwiches, and a moderator asks them, if we built a product that did X, Y, and Z, would you buy it?
But the fatal flaw of traditional market research, especially when applied to highly innovative or disruptive products, is that human beings are notoriously terrible at predicting their own future behavior.
Oh, they are awful at it.
If you ask a customer what they want, their imagination is limited by their current reality. They will inevitably describe a slightly faster, slightly cheaper version of the product they are already using. They cannot conceptualize a paradigm shift.
There is a famous quote, often attributed to Henry Ford, that captures this perfectly. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Exactly. You can't ask a focus group if they want an iPhone in 2005 because they don't know what a smartphone is. They'll just ask for a BlackBerry with a better physical keyboard.
Right.
So if you can't rely on focus groups to tell you what to build, how do you discover the truth?
Well, in the lean framework, an experiment is never a theoretical inquiry. It is not a survey, and it is not a focus group. The experiment is the first iteration of the product itself.
The experiment is the product. That completely collapses the traditional timeline of research followed by development.
Traditional market research attempts to guess what might be successful tomorrow based on hypothetical answers. But a lean experiment gets immediate, visceral feedback on what is actually working today.
Because they have to actually use it.
Yes, it forces the prospective customer to make a real-world choice in real time. It requires them to spend their actual money or their actual time, thereby generating real customers and solving real problems from day one, even if the solution is duct taped together on the back end.
Consider the cultural transformation that happened at Kodak Gallery under Mark Cook.
Oh, this is a perfect example.
Right. He was the vice president of products there, and he realized their entire development pipeline was broken. The traditional culture of the engineering department was essentially an order-taking system.
How did it work?
Well, the product manager would write a spec document saying, I want this feature built by Q3, and the engineering team would just say, okay, we'll build it. No questions asked.
Which is a factory for producing waste.
Exactly. Mark Cook recognized that.
Yeah.
So he halted that process completely. Before a single line of code was allowed to be written for a new feature, he forced his teams to answer 4 distinct critical questions.
Those 4 questions serve as the ultimate gauntlet for validated learning. If you can't answer them, you shouldn't be building.
What's the first one?
Question 1. Do consumers recognize that they actually have the problem you were trying to solve?
Man, that is the ultimate killer of startups. You invent a brilliant technical solution to a problem that nobody actually cares about.
Right.
If the customer doesn't feel the pain of the problem, they are not going to actively seek out your solution, no matter how elegant it is.
Exactly. Which leads directly to question 2. If there was a solution available, would they actually buy it?
Meaning, is the pain acute enough that they will pull out their credit card and part with their hard-earned money to make the pain go away?
Because lots of people have minor inconveniences they complain about, but they aren't actually willing to pay to fix them.
Very true.
Then, question 3 narrows the focus even more. Would they buy it from us?
This is a question of brand permission, right?
Yeah.
Like, do we have the credibility, the distribution channels, and the inherent trust with this demographic to be the ones who sell them this specific solution?
Exactly. You might have a great solution, but you might be the wrong company to sell it. And finally, question 4. Can we actually build it?
It is brilliant that "can we build it" is purposefully placed as the absolute last question in the sequence.
It has to be. In the modern tech economy, with open source software, cloud computing, and global supply chains, the answer to can we build it is almost universally yes.
Yeah, the tech is rarely the bottleneck anymore.
We possess the technology and the talent to build almost anything we can imagine. The existential threat to a modern business venture is rarely technical risk. It is almost exclusively market risk.
Will anyone buy it?
Right. Therefore, spending 6 months proving that your engineering team can build a feature before you have proven that a single human being actually wants it is the purest definition of waste.
Let me give you a visceral physical world example of this concept in action, because I think it's too easy to just think of this as a software trick,
Oh, definitely. Let's hear it.
Let's look at the Village Laundry Service in India.
Yeah.
The context here is vital to understanding the experiment. A vast majority of the population in India, over 90%, lacks access to a personal washing machine.
Okay.
They rely on an ancient, informal network of local workers called dobies. The dobies collect the clothes, take them to the local river, wash them by hand, beat them against rocks to get the dirt out, and hang them to dry.
That sounds incredibly labor-intensive.
It's an incredibly slow process, taking up to 10 days, and the clothes are subjected to brutal wear and tear.
So an entrepreneur looks at that massive inefficiency and sees a textbook opportunity for disruption.
Right. Now, the traditional execution-first approach would be to raise $20 million in venture capital, build a chain of massive, modern brick-and-mortar laundromats across Bangalore, buy a fleet of branded delivery trucks, and launch a massive marketing campaign to change consumer behavior.
They would build the giant sinkable boat immediately.
But the team behind the Village Laundry Service didn't do that. They understood that their grand vision rested on a massive, highly fragile value hypothesis.
Which was what?
Will people in this culture actually hand over their dirty laundry to a modern kiosk? And will they pay a premium for a faster machine wash service?
That's a huge assumption. They had no idea if the cultural habit of using the local doby was too deeply ingrained to break.
Exactly.
They didn't know if people would trust a sterile corporate brand with their personal garments.
So what was their minimum viable product? How did they test that hypothesis without spending millions? They didn't sign a lease for a building. They didn't buy a fleet of trucks.
What did they do?
They took a single standard consumer-grade washing machine,
Yeah.
and they physically mounted it onto the back of a standard pickup truck.
Wow.
Yeah, they parked that truck on a busy street corner, put up a makeshift sign, and literally offered to wash people's clothes right there on the street.
It is the ultimate paper boat. But crucially, it is a functional product. It is providing a real, tangible service to a real customer in exchange for real money.
Right, but the entire apparatus was constructed solely to generate empirical data to test a hypothesis.
And I bet the data they gathered was phenomenal.
It was. They discovered that, yes, the demand was there, people would pay for the service. But because they were interacting directly with the customers on the street corner, they learned nuances they never could have predicted in a boardroom.
Like what?
They noticed that customers were lingering around the truck. They learned that people actively wanted to see their clothes being washed through the glass door of the machine.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, they wanted visual confirmation that their garments weren't being mixed in with a stranger's dirty laundry. They learned that the sheer speed of getting clothes back the same day was a massive selling point they could charge a premium for.
And they gained all of this validated learning without pouring a single ounce of concrete for a brick-and-mortar store.
Exactly. They successfully transformed an abstract, high-risk business thesis into a rigorous, low-cost scientific experiment. By doing so, they demonstrated the profound shift in how we must define success.
Because success for the Village Laundry Service in that first month was not, hey, we successfully deployed a fleet of trucks on schedule and under budget.
No, success was we acquired validated learning about exactly how to solve our customers' pain point in a way that they will actually pay for.
So what does this all mean when we pull these threads together?
Well, we have completely deconstructed the traditional playbook. We've exposed the difference between the postmortem excuse of just learning and the rigorous proactive standard of validated learning.
Right. We've redefined value as the act of learning and categorized anything that doesn't contribute to that learning, no matter how impressive it looks on a calendar, as sheer waste.
We've warned against the chaos of the just do it fallacy, replacing it with the discipline of the value and growth hypotheses. And we've seen how the experiment itself, no matter how unpolished, must function as your first product.
It means we have to accept the fundamental reality of the modern economy. We are no longer constrained by our ability to manufacture things or write code.
We're really not.
We are entirely constrained by our ability to figure out the right things to build in the first place. The grand, overarching question for every single project you undertake, whether you are a startup founder, a middle manager, or a lead engineer, is no longer, can this be built?
Right. The vital existential questions are, should this be built? And can we build a sustainable business model around it?
Exactly. By treating every product launch, every new feature, and every marketing campaign as a targeted scientific experiment aimed at validated learning, you strip away the massive waste of success theater.
You stop lying to yourself with vanity metrics.
Yes, and you finally align your daily efforts with actual, undeniable reality.
Think about the implications of this, not just for your next product launch, but on a macro level. If we are supposed to treat every business idea as a strict scientific experiment to see if it even deserves to exist, try applying that framework to your own trajectory.
Oh, I love that. Applying it to yourself.
Yeah, what is the value hypothesis of your current career path? What are the massive, untested assumptions you are making right now about what will bring you financial stability and fulfillment 5 years down the road?
That's a heavy question.
It is. Are you operating on a foundation of validated learning? Actually testing those assumptions through small, calculated risks and experiments in your daily life? Or are you just running on the audacity of zero, drafting a beautiful mental spreadsheet and hoping the future magically validates your untested plan?
That is a fascinating and slightly terrifying question to ponder.
It really is.
And now that we have established how to formulate your hypotheses, how to identify waste, and how to design your initial experiments, the true operational challenge begins.
There's more.
Oh, much more. Next time, we will dive deep into the specific mechanics of the build, measure, learn feedback loop. We will uncover how to increase the velocity of that loop, and we will dissect the dangerous allure of vanity metrics.
Those highly deceptive, up and to the right numbers that can make your completely failing experiment look like a massive, unstoppable success to the untrained eye.
Exactly. We'll tear those down next.
Until next time, keep experimenting.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.